Chapter 444, Liu Yang's Strongest Move. Chapter 444, Liu Yang's Strongest Move. Dark Angel _ Xin Zhongcheng, 29th on the last Prodigy roll. In this tournament, he managed to advance even further and squeeze into the top 10. He reached the 8th place this time. The name of the white-robed Sword King resounded all over the world, and with him being merely in his early 20s, it was highly possible that he would become one of the leaders of the new generation of the North region. And it was precisely this kind of outstanding genius that was completely suppressed and thrashed easily by another. A consecutive bout of 7 punches was enough to defeat him. What kind of concept was that? A shocked stillness fell upon all the spectators. How did the Winter Moon sect come to possess such a freak? Against an opponent in the same cultivation level, 7 punches were enough to defeat Xin Zhongcheng. If he actually broke through to the spiritual infant tier, then wouldn't that mean that he could sweep away all those in the same cultivation level and be invincible for an era? I've lost. Xin Zhongcheng coughed up blood. Though he had not suffered too serious an injury, he had still been attacked quite harshly. However, a heated battle intent continued to burn within his eyes. I will make you my aim, and one day, I will definitely defeat you. I wish you good luck, Ling said, smiling. He wouldn't be using this identity for too long, and in future, Xin Zhongcheng would have to seek out an inexistent person for a battle. Just the thought of it made Ling pity him a bit. Xin Zhongcheng stared at Ling for a moment longer before finally turning around and leaving. Heavens, so powerful. If this guy actually took part in the Prodigy tournament, he'd definitely have the ability to attempt seizing the first place. Perhaps he does not think the Prodigy role is important at all? That's right. I remember there was a powerful guy who previously delivered a palm strike worth 20 stars of the spiritual infant tier of battle prowess, but he absolutely disdained taking part. What? 20 stars of spiritual infant tier? Are you kidding me? Hee, you can make some casual inquiries. Who else doesn't know about that? With that kind of ability, there is of course no need for him to participate in the Prodigy tournament. That would practically be playing around with kids, and much too degrading. That may not be the case. That person said that he had used a spirit tool, which was what allowed him that kind of battle prowess. I, too, am more willing to believe that theory. In the midst of the conversations of the spectators, the battles proceeded. The senior elite cultivators had indeed not wasted their years spent cultivating. Even if they had similar battle prowess of the same cultivation level with their opponent, their cultivation was much higher, and they had all reached the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier. Furthermore, they had all stayed at this level for a certain period of time and strengthened their foundations to an incredible extent. Thus, the senior elite cultivators all qualified for the next round, and only a very few rookies managed to display outstanding performance with even more powerful battle prowess. For example, Liu Yang, combined with his pet demonic beast, possessed amazing battle prowess. There was also young Jun He. Obviously, this was his first time taking part in the Prodigy tournament, yet he had the peak cultivation of the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier. They did not allow the mature generation to be the only outstanding people. In addition, there was also Ling and that masked man. The vigor of the younger generation was in no way inferior. The second round of battles concluded, and the third round quickly began right after. This time, Ling opponent was Liu Yang, ranked 2nd in the Prodigy role this year. Being able to defeat Zhu Xian, someone whom many had expected to be the first place this year, there was of course no need to doubt Liu Yang had powerful battle prowess. However, the person he now faced was Ling, whose battle prowess had surpassed the upper limits that could be calculated in the spiritual pedestal tier. Obviously, he was destined for a tragic ending. He and his pet demonic beast, frost-clouded leopard, ascended the stage together and stood unyielding like a mountain. Liu Yang was a powerfully built man. In such cold weather, he had still worn a short robe, which exposed his broad shoulders. It was as if they were forged from rock. He seemed like he could topple the mountains and crack the earth with a casual punch. And the frost-clouded leopard looked even mightier. Its body was 3 meters long and reached a height of 2 meters. It was completely covered with a snow-white fur coat like it was excellent fine satin. With every exhalation, frost would immediately appear in the surrounding cold air, which rustled down onto the stage. Han Lin, I cannot help but admit, you are the strongest opponent I have ever faced. Liu Yang stared at Ling Han. You are worthy of a full-effort battle from me. I'll use a powerful move that I had not used even in the Prodigy tournament some days ago. When they heard his words, the spectators were all astonished. This guy had already charged all the way to the second place of the Prodigy roll, and he actually had not used all his ability. He actually still had a powerful move in reserve. Hiss, why hadn't he used it then? Could it be that he did not want to take the position of first place? Wrong. Since it's the most powerful move, he will of course not use it easily. Otherwise, if others knew of it beforehand, they could stay on alert in advance. It's fine even if he was ranked second in the Prodigy tournament. Anyways, the rankings would be rearranged again next year, and he would only need to show enough battle prowess and he'd still be able to turn the tide around and get first place. Now, for the sake of the key to open up the 12 Heaven Mystery Realms, he can no longer afford to care about that. Of course, as long as he could obtain the inheritance inside, he could possibly become an ultimate cultivator of the Shattering Void tier in future. Anyone would put their best effort in for that kind of reward. Yeah, I had initially thought that Han Lin was definitely going to win this battle, but there seems to be a bit of suspense for the end of this battle now. Hee, it'll be more exciting with a little suspense. Ling Han smiled and said, Oh, then I hope you will not be disappointed. He currently was invincible among all those in the same cultivation tier, and felt a cold solitude. If there was somebody who could give him some trouble, he would in fact be very pleased. As you wish, Liu Yang declared darkly. He suddenly leaped and charged towards Ling Han in attack, his hands forming a seal, and shouted, 3 lives, 3 destructions, life and death reincarnation seal. Hong. His palms formed uncountable numbers of tiny patterns which transformed into multiple simple, unadorned letters. Then they all shot out and shadowed Ling Han. This really was a little omnipresent, and cut off all paths of retreat for Ling Han. Ling Han looked disappointed and asked, This is your strongest move? He shot out a punch in a very simple attack, but an endless shock wave of power spread out. Pong, 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 and these letters were instantly destroyed. Liu Yang looked slightly surprised, though he had not thought to use this one single move to defeat Ling Han. But the fact that the latter had so easily and delightedly dispersed his move still made him slightly shocked. However, he did not disappoint Ling Han, and immediately formed another seal and struck towards Ling Han. Ling Han stood at the same spot, neither dodging nor ducking. He merely shot out another casual punch that easily dispersed Liu Yang's attack. He yawned and said, Are you going to use your strongest move or not? If not, I'm going to throw you off the stage then. When they heard these words, the spectators all hissed. How humongous was the tremendous gap in power between the two of them that caused Ling not to say something like that. This guy was so ferocious and powerful, so was there anyone else who could stop him now? Liu Yang humphed and said, Since you want to see it so much, I shall let you experience it then. He once again pounced, and this time, that leopard actually moved as well. In an instant, it had raced to stand behind Ling Han. It opened its mouth and a white light shot out. It had not yet touched Ling Han's back, yet the endless iciness in its breath was already circulating, which instantly froze Ling Han where he was standing. Layer after layer of ice appeared at a visible rate which instantly sealed Ling Han inside a 3 feet tall, 1 foot wide ice pillar. However, after this move, light left the frost-clouded leopard's eyes as well. It was as if it had lost a considerable amount of weight from its body and could not help but lie on the ground. So this was Liu Yang's strongest move. Obviously, the frost-clouded leopard could only use this kind of powerful move once in a short period of time. If it was not able to freeze its opponent, then the pet demonic beast would lose all ability to fight. Furthermore, the disciples of Beast Emperor sect depended very much on the battle prowess of their pet demonic beast. If their pet demonic beast was unable to fight, then there would of course be a tremendous reduction in their battle prowess as well. Chapter 445, Qualifying for the Finals. Chapter 445, Qualifying for the Finals. Previously, Liu Yang's continuous forming of seals to attack was merely a deception to make Ling Han focus on him and create the best opportunity for his frost-clouded leopard to attack. Indeed, he had succeeded. Han Lin, you are indeed very powerful. However, you are too arrogant. Liu Yang smirked, then shot a punch directly at the pillar of ice. With ice freezing Ling Han's movements, his defenses were naturally at rock bottom. How could the former be able to block his full power blow then? Ka. But it was right at this moment that innumerable cracks actually appeared on the ice pillar, as if a spider web was unraveling. Ling Han was about to escape. What? Liu Yang was instantly so shocked that his hair was practically standing on ends. After suffering such a powerful move from the frost-clouded leopard, he actually was about to escape so quickly? Impossible. One had to know that the frost-clouded leopard was in the 5th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, and this freezing attack was enough to make it lose practically all ability to attack. It could be imagined, then, how terrifyingly powerful this attack was. Though he thought this, Liu Yang's fist still shot forwards. This was his only chance to attain victory. Pong! His fist had yet to reach when the pillar of ice suddenly shattered. Innumerable shards of ice shot out, and the impact actually sent Liu Yang flying. With an ah, he spat out a mouthful of blood, and a great many wounds had appeared on his body, which had been either slashed, cut, or pierced open by the flying ice shards. Liu Yang was still the second strongest elite on the Prodigy roll, after all, so he managed to stop just in time, and was not thrown off the tournament stage with this single strike. He panted loudly, his eyes filled with disbelief. He had used so many powerful moves, and yet they almost had no effect. Ling Han slowly stepped out and said calmly, "Your pet should be in the ranks of rulers, right? Otherwise, it could not possibly possess a talent mystical power." That was right. The previous freezing attack was not simply any random attack, but the unique freezing ability of the frost-clouded leopard, which was why this single attack caused the latter to practically lose all ability to battle after using it. However, its bloodline is not pure. That's why it could only use its mystical power once, then collapsed, Ling Han continued. True, if that had not been the case, how could a demonic beast in the ranks of rulers be willing to become the pet of a human being? Unless one had remarkably great luck and managed to take in a demonic beast that had the bloodline of a ruler when it was still very young. Even so, when the demonic beast's intelligence matured, it was still possible that it would turn against its master because a demonic beast in the ranks of rulers was too proud and could absolutely not allow itself to serve under another. Just like the rulers amongst human beings, they could be defeated, but would definitely not allow themselves to be subservient to another. Liu Yang could not speak, though he still had many powerful moves he had yet to use. But that previous attack was his strongest trump card, and since even this move was ineffective, what else could he do? He sighed disappointedly and said, "I admit defeat." At first, he was extremely confident and believed that there was only a gap of cultivation level between himself and Yang Junhao. If they were of the same cultivation level, and he and his frost-clouded leopard worked together, they could definitely defeat the latter. But Ling Han, who was merely in the 1st layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, managed to easily defeat him. This was a very harsh blow to his self-esteem. Seeing him leave in low spirits, Ling Han merely smiled faintly. If Liu Yang managed to get back onto his feet, there would definitely be a place for him among the most powerful characters in the future. However, if he was not able to recover from this blow and continued to be depressed, he might possibly create the record of being the first one who had been on the Prodigy roll yet was unable to break through to the Flower Blossom tier. But this was none of his business, it was merely a passing thought. Ling Han walked down from the tournament stage. He deliberately observed the battle of the masked man. Just like him, the latter's battle style was extremely simple, but every punch and every palm strike possessed just the right amount of power. If he could use merely 30% of his power to end the battle, he would definitely not use 35. This did not just show the precise control of the masked man, but also his absolute control over how the battle proceeded. That was how he knew how much power he had to use to achieve his desired results. This man, was extremely terrifying. Ling Han felt a sense of familiarity from this person, but he had never seen this kind of battle style before. In terms of control of power, he could possibly be superior even to the Sword Emperor and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. Such a monster actually appeared in the spiritual pedestal tier. In the fourth round, Ling Han's opponent was Yang Junhao. He had just fought with number 2 of the Prodigy role, and now he was going to fight number 1. What a coincidence. The two of them walked up to the tournament stage. Yang Junhao smiled and said, I was just complaining about the fact that I did not have enough fun at the Prodigy tournament battles, and now I have finally encountered a person that is worthy of making me fight. Ling Han laughed loudly and asked, Didn't you have a lot of fun playing around with a 5-6-year-old little girl? Yang Junhao's face immediately darkened. He was convinced that he was invincible in his age range, yet was actually thrashed so terribly by Chun-Yo. Thankfully, the latter had not used her teeth. Otherwise, it was very possible that he would suffer terribly. The loss that he had suffered at the Hun-Yo's hands was something that he considered to be a great humiliation. This was really touching on his sore spot, and he instantly became angered. Come. Since you lack discipline, I'll give you another good thrashing. Ling Han hooked his finger at him. Han Lin, you are so confident in yourself. When you are defeated later, will you cry? Yang Junhao asked, smirking coldly. Ling Han smiled and directly shot out. So fast. This thought merely flashed through Yang Junhao's head when he felt a pain in his lower abdomen, and his whole body was sent flying. With a pong, he fell onto the ground, his head completely blank. Hua, the whole area was in an uproar. The one and only number 1 of the Prodigy role did not even manage to resist one attack when he was simply thrown off the tournament stage by his opponent. That was too humiliating, wasn't it? Liu Yang, at least, lasted a number of moves, and he managed to even freeze Ling Han. At that instant, it seemed like he had hopes of winning, but in Yang Junhao's case, Yang Junhao himself had not managed to react yet. He had too many powerful moves he had yet to use. Furthermore, there was no restriction on spiritual tools this time, and his battle prowess could still reach the level of pseudo-flower blossom tier, at least. But with a mere punch, he was thrown off the tournament stage. I refused to submit. His face twitched madly. This was too humiliating. The number 1 person on the Prodigy role was actually sent flying with a single punch by his opponent. How was he supposed to continue holding his head high if this spread out? He wanted to get back on the tournament stage, but was coldly stopped by the referee. The latter even rolled his eyes at him, which almost made him explode in anger. In the 5th round, Ling Han encountered the strongest person of the previous Prodigy role, Yukuan Luan. After this battle, he would be able to enter into the finals, and his opponent would be the victor of the battle between the masked person, Zhang San, and Chao Tian. Chao Tian was the number 1 person of the Prodigy role before the last. In terms of power, he was superior to even Yukuan Luan. After all, Chao Tian had accumulated cultivation at the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier for an additional 2 or 3 years. Yukuan Luan walked up onto the tournament stage, stood facing Ling Han, smiled, and said, I had originally thought that I would be facing Yang Junhao, and there would be a battle between the number 1 person of the previous Prodigy role and the number 1 person of the current Prodigy role. What a real pity. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, There's nothing to be done about it. I am too strong. Oh, and how strong are you? Yukuan Luan asked smilingly. Much stronger than you. I'll just defeat you in 3 punches then, because the battle on the opposite side has already concluded. Ling Han said. What? Yukuan Luan was shocked and looked at the tournament stage beside them. Indeed, Chao Tian had been sent flying off the tournament stage. So fast? Yukuan Luan's expression changed in shock. Though he did not fear Chao Tian, there was absolutely no way he had the ability to defeat him so quickly. But the masked man, Zhang San, managed to achieve the feat. This meant that if the two of them were to fight, he would doubtlessly be defeated. There is no use to think so far ahead. It is impossible that you will fight him, Ling Han said, smiling. Yukuan Luan took a deep breath, then actually smiled and said, Since you have such overwhelming confidence, then I shall allow you to have this opponent then. After saying so, he actually leaped off the tournament stage directly, forfeiting the match without even fighting. Chapter 446, Fierce Battle with the Masked Man. Chapter 446, Fierce Battle with the Masked Man. A very decisive man. Ling Han nodded in agreement. Even if Yukuan Luan could defeat him, since the masked man was capable of easily defeating Tian, the former could also naturally defeat Yukuan Luan easily as well. Thus, the latter simply chose to draw back wisely in the face of overwhelming odds to save some face. When news of this incident spread, it naturally had some effect on Yukuan Luan's reputation. But that would still be better than being publicly defeated in front of all the spectators. What more when he could possibly suffer a crushing defeat? Ling Han turned his eyes towards the masked man, who also turned to look at him. There was a green-colored light flickering in the eyes of the latter that exuded a terrifying pressure. Even Ling Han, who had a sliver of the divine sense of the heaven tier, felt his heart tremble in fear. How could this be possible? Could this be an ultimate cultivator of the shattering void tier that had deliberately disguised himself to participate in this tournament? But if he really was in the shattering void tier, then he could just have simply grabbed the key, and what could anyone do? Not just in the North region, even if this happened in the Middle State, no one would dare to say anything. So strange. Neither Ling Han nor the masked man made any requests to rest, and chose to battle directly instead. Have I seen you before? Ling Han asked smilingly, beginning to probe for information. The masked man bared his teeth in a grin and said, I, on the other hand, recognize you, though you have changed your face. Ling Han was greatly shocked. Someone actually saw through his disguise. Come, make your move, and let me see how far your ability has improved, the masked man said. Ling Han's hands curled into fists. He did not dare to be the slightest bit careless. He was completely unable to see through this man. In addition, there was a bone-deep evilness about him which Ling Han despised beyond measure. Hold on. Enlightenment flashed through Ling Han's head and he asked, Yen? Hee, so you finally remember? The masked man asked, smiling. Yen Tian Zhao. No wonder this person gave him an indescribably evil feeling. Ling Han had only sensed such shocking evilness on this man before, as if he was the embodiment of evil. Ling Han had never thought that after leaving the Rain Country for almost a year, there would have been such gigantic improvement in his ability. At that time, though Yin Tian Zhao was slightly monstrous as well, he was still very, very far from the shocking extent he was now. Neither of them called out the other's real name. You keep my secret, and I'll keep yours. Come fight then, Ling Han declared, confidence high. He believed that in the same cultivation level, he could sweep away all who stood before him. As you wish. Yin Tian Zhao's figure shot forth and charged to attack Ling Han. Pong, 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 pong. In an instant, the two fighters had exchanged a dozen blows. Ling Han was stunned. Yin Tian Zhao's strength was actually not inferior to his at all, and in terms of battle details, the former had achieved a shocking height, as if he was a born warrior who could completely battle based on pure instinct. There were obviously a few times that he had been caught in a dangerous spot, but Yin Tian Zhao used his elbow to shove, waist to knock, and shoulder to push. It looked like he was not using any particular technique, but he could somehow dissolve the dangerous situation and instead cause quite considerable trouble to Ling Han. If it had not been for the fact that Ling Han had formed the body of Iron Sheet, he would have likely experienced great loss at his hands. However, the body of Iron Sheet was not perfect. After Yin Tian Zhao discovered his shockingly strong defense, he switched from palm strikes to using his fingers to attack, purposely aiming for Ling Han's eyes. Every strike was sharp and severe, forcing Ling Han into a very difficult position. When fighting with others, Ling Han could always manage to get the upper hand in the overall battle. The divine sense of the heaven tier allowed him to predict the attacks his opponent would make so that he could prepare to parry in advance. In other words, the moment his opponent made a move, victory was already in his grasp. But it was completely the other way round when fighting with Yin Tian Zhao. He could predict every move that Ling Han made. As a result, Though Ling Han had shockingly powerful battle prowess, it was of no use, and he was gradually being suppressed by his opponent. Ling Han suddenly recalled that Tian Zhao's eyes once emitted a pressure that caused even him to feel fear and dread. Could it be that Tian Zhao, like him, had also been taken over by an elite cultivator? In addition, the former was even stronger than him, and could very possibly be an ultimate elite of the Shattering Void tier. Only in that situation would Tian Zhao's divine sense be able to suppress his own, and completely suppress him in battle prowess as well. Interesting. Very interesting. Not only was Ling Han not the slightest bit scared, a burning battle spirit arose in him instead. In the spiritual pedestal tier, there was practically no one able to fight him on equal grounds, and now that a great foe had suddenly appeared, his blood was boiling in excitement. Let's have a good fight. He laughed loudly, using his war elephant fist. 7 dragon heads appeared and surged towards Tian Zhao. Tian Zhao could not help but be slightly surprised, and words slipped out of his mouth. The technique of the Earth Dragon Palace. Earth Dragon Palace. A thought streaked through Ling Han's head. The war elephant fist originated from Nalan II, and Nalan II came from the Earth Dragon sect. Ever since the Azura Demon Emperor recognized the mysterious 3000 technique as a martial arts technique from the Heaven Sword Palace, Ling Han had made a note. Perhaps those few great sects in the Middle State all had relations to the realm of Godzi Shuexian from the Blue Thunder sect, even had clansmen in the realm of gods. Thus, once Tian Zhao said Earth Dragon Palace, he definitely did not believe that the former had had a slip of the tongue, and wrongly called the Earth Dragon sect as Earth Dragon Palace. Could this guy also have some kind of relation to the realm of gods? Tian Zhao was sealed by another when he was 5 years old, and since then, he had always been in a state of coma. Only after he received an alchemical pill from Ling Han had he awoken. After that, no more than a few days, and he had already soared up to the spiritual ocean tier, and furthermore, displayed a very strange power. If Tian Zhao had always been possessed by a god, then everything could be explained. A pressure that could cause his heart to tremble in fear, as well as that extremely meticulous battle ability. Who exactly are you? Ling Han asked somberly. Oh, I, too, would like to ask, who are you? Tian Zhao smiled as he continued to deliver a barrage of attacks with his fists. He obviously did not have a single flash of fist chi, but the punches he delivered were extremely powerful and oppressive, and it seemed as if Ling Han delivered himself up to be punched to show the absolute control that his opponent had over the battle. Indeed. Ling Han nodded internally. The other had definitely been taken over by an elite cultivator who could very possibly be a god. At that time, someone must have seen something odd about him, but had only sealed Tian Zhao away, causing him to go into deep slumber. But now that he had been unsealed, this soul could finally take complete control over this body and display a terrifying battle prowess. You've come from the realm of gods, right? Ling Han continued to exchange blows with the other, whilst asking in a lowered voice. This was too universally shocking, and he did not want to be overheard by anyone else. Realm of gods. Tian Zhao laughed loudly, and similarly lowering his voice, he said, Frog at the bottom of a well, even close to the moment of your death, you remain ignorant. How very amusing. What do you mean? Ling Han questioned. Perhaps a few dozen years, or perhaps over 100 years later, you will know. Tian Zhao said coldly. But now, lose. I am determined to win the treasure in the 12 heaven mystery realms. Haha. Ling Han laughed coldly as well. If that is so, then I can't allow you to have your way even more. You can't stop me, Tian Zhao declared arrogantly. Now, I can display close to 100% of my battle prowess. How could you possibly be able to oppose me? Don't forget, I am only in the first layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, Ling Han said with a smile. This was his greatest advantage. Tian Zhao could not help his eyes turning cold. Though he had completely taken control of this body and could display his full battle prowess in it, he, too, was restricted by the power of this body, and his battle prowess was not without its limits. Ling Han was already so powerful now, so if he reached the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, his battle prowess would definitely rise a few more levels, and he would be even more difficult to stand against at that time. Then I can't allow you to live even more. A green pentagram lit up in Tian Zhao's eyes, and he raised his hands. Instantly, multiple green silken strands spread out. Pung! It was precisely at this moment that a man was seen hurriedly rushing into the great arena and exclaimed in shock, "My lord clan head, the key has been stolen by a weirdo that hid in a coffin." Chapter 447. The key was snatched. Chapter 447. The key was snatched. Updated by Novel Full. Key. When they heard this word, both Ling Han and Tian Zhao stopped fighting simultaneously. They subconsciously thought that this was referring to the secret key that could open up the Sagittarius Palace Hall. Indeed, the clan head of the Jian clan immediately stood up wearing an expression of shock and rage as he shouted, "How could that be possible? The key has been hidden so well, so how could someone have found it?" In reply to clan head, the man answered with fear and trepidation. That man used some kind of unknown secret technique to take control of Fourth Elder and had him personally take out the key which he handed over to that man. Then the latter escaped in a coffin. Ronghuan Xian. Ling Han was immediately certain that it was him. Though there were possibly other disciples of the Thousand Corpse sect in Extreme Yang City, the only man who would dare to so publicly appear as a disciple of the Thousand Corpse sect could only be Ronghuan Xian. With the 3 lives corpse casket, he could be as willful as he liked. Without a word, Ling Han and Tian Zhao both simply turned and left. With a few leaps, they had reached the highest point in the great arena. Their eyes swept over the surrounding area and soon saw where the commotion was. They then respectively used their motion techniques and moved to pursue. Since the key has been snatched, what point was there to continue participating in any marriage tournament? Xiao, who too, used her extreme speed and joined the pursuit. She shot a look at Tian Zhao, opened her mouth slightly and bared her snow-white teeth, seeming to be filled with battle spirit. A hint of dread actually appeared in Tian Zhao's eyes, and he could not help but maintain a certain distance from Hunyo. The Azura Demon Emperor could possess Ronghuan Xian, and Tian Zhao was also suspected to be taken over by a godlike being. So if Hunyo, too, had a terrifying godly spirit in her, it didn't seem strange anymore. However, Ling Han was still extremely doubtful. Was there such a god that was violent yet whose favorite activity was to eat and also play cute? The origin of the little girl's oddity was in her spirit base, and seemed to be completely different from Ronghuan Xian and Tian Zhao. What a headache! There were really too many monsters in this lifetime. Ling Han ignored it for the moment. The most important thing now was to cut Ronghuan Xian off and snatch back the key. Thankfully, though the defenses of the 3 lives corpse casket were extremely impressive, it was not too overwhelmingly quick. At least, the gap between Ling Han and Tian Zhao and the casket was slowly decreasing. There was no need to mention Hunyo with her terrifying speed. However, she did not go all out, and instead chose to stay by Ling Han's side. There was no shortage of the Flower Blossom tier elites in Extreme Yang City, and though Ling Han had not seen any before, he believed that there were also ultimate elite cultivators of the spiritual infant tier as well. Ronghuan Xian dared to so boldly snatch away the key. How could they so calmly allow him to escape? But at least until this moment, no Flower Blossom tier cultivator had made a move yet. It was understandable. If they snatched back the key in Extreme Yang City, there was a high chance they could ultimately be pressured into returning the key to the Jian clan. However, once it had left the city, that would considered to be in the wilderness. And if one obtained something in the wilderness, that naturally belonged to him, and there was no such thing as a lost item. This was a hidden rule. Thus, everyone was waiting. They were all waiting for Ronghuan Xian to leave the city, and at that time, it would definitely tempt a large number of elite cultivators into acting. Flower Blossom tier, or even spiritual infant tier cultivators making a move would not be strange. The 3 lives corpse casket cleared the way, and no one could stop it in its path. It just took about 10 minutes, and Ronghuan Xian exited the city. Instantly, multiple figures appeared, no longer enduring silently. Be careful. This casket is a treasure of the Thousand Corpse sect and possesses extraordinary power, someone reminded. He was a flower blossom tear cultivator that had once appeared in the Dark Devil Forest and personally witnessed how terrifying the Three Lives Corpse casket could be. A considerable number of people nodded, but even more looked disdainful. Even if it was a level 10 spirit tool, how much power it could display would still depend on who the user was. Since you all are so cowardly, then I shall humbly receive this key. One of them made a move and delivered a palm strike in the direction of the Three Lives Corpse casket. Idiot! A large number of people thought. A palm struck onto the Three Lives Corpse casket, and instantly, multiple patterns lit up on the lid of the casket that transformed into a floating army of skulls and shot out in the form of a spear at the man. The man was greatly shocked and hurriedly spread out his martial intent to form a layer of defense over his entire body. However, the spear simply pierced directly through his defenses. Pooh! It pierced through his head, and blood dripped from the tip of the spear. His luck was not as good as that flower blossom tear cultivator from the Dark Devil Forest. He was killed with a direct pierce through the head. The army of skulls disappeared automatically, and when the body of the flower blossom tear cultivator lost its support, it instantly fell down from the skies and onto the ground, causing the layer of dirt on the ground to be disturbed. Ha 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 ha! You actually gifted me with the body of a flower blossom tear cultivator as material for my corpse soldier, thanks. Rong Huanxian's voice was heard from within the casket. The lid of the casket opened. An arm stretched out and quickly dragged the body of the flower blossom tear cultivator inside. Pong! The lid of the coffin quickly closed back up again. When they saw this scene, everyone was struck speechless. This casket was defying logic, so what could they do now? Looks like flower blossom tear cultivators were of no use, so the only other option was to have spiritual infant tear cultivators make a move. A powerful cultivator whose whole body was enshrouded in a purple-colored divine light appeared. An impressive aura emanated from him, and even spiritual pedestal tear cultivators were forced to their knees in front of him, without the slightest ability to resist. An elite cultivator of the spiritual infant tier. However, Ling Han, Hun Yo, and Yin Tian Zhao were no ordinary people, and were not the slightest bit afraid that they would be oppressed by this terrifying aura. Furthermore, Rong Huanxian, being protected by the Three Lives Corpse casket, was also unafraid. Moreover, this kind of aura was not invincible. As long as one was a ruler that had managed to form 7 flashes of qi, he would be qualified to resist and could decrease the effects this kind of aura had. It's Violet Point Elder. When they saw this powerful cultivator appear, all those flower blossom tier cultivators gasped in surprise. Though they were all aware that this would draw the attention of spiritual infant tier cultivators, when such an ultimate elite cultivator appeared, it still caused much commotion. Indeed, even spiritual infant tier elite cultivators would be moved by the inheritance inside the 12 heaven mystery realms. Though Violet Point Elder might not be qualified to enter into the mystery realm, he had a great many disciples and grand disciples. There definitely had to be 1 or 2 talented ones among them, and as long as they obtained the inheritance, wouldn't that be equivalent to the Violet Point Elder obtaining it as well? The Violet Point Elder's figure descended and began to press a palm onto the Three Lives Corpse casket. Ha ha ha, stupid old man. Are you here to seek death as well? Rong Huanxian laughed loudly, appearing very arrogant and conceited. This caused everyone much displeasure. He was merely a minor character in the spiritual pedestal tier, and just because he had a level 10 spirit tool, he dared to undermine them. This was also because there was a shortage of ultimate elite cultivators in the North region. Otherwise, if he dared to try the same thing in the Middle State, even with such a turtle shell-like defense, the only conclusion would be him being dragged out and killed. The Violet Point Elder pressed a palm onto the casket, and instantly, the Three Lives Corpse casket reacted. Another skull soldier appeared and slashed towards him. Pong, pong, pong. The both of them instantly broke out into a fierce battle. The Violet Point Elder was not at a disadvantage, but also did not manage to destroy the skull soldier, and a stalemate instantly ensued. But the Skull Soldier was only an attack formed by the 3 Lives Corpse Casket. Even if it was destroyed, the 3 Lives Corpse Casket needed only to form a second one. Would the Violet Point Elder be able to withstand such a rate of depletion of energy? Violet Elder, old man, I'll give you a hand. Another spiritual infant tier cultivator appeared, and he simply slashed out directly with his sword at the casket. Hong! A slash of sword chi took the form of a divine sword that was as long as 1,000 feet, which ruthlessly sliced forth. Pong! The divine sword sliced down on the casket and instantly invoked multiple ripples of light and shadow. Woo! Ronghuan Xian called out in pain. Though he was not directly attacked, the vibration from the impact of the strike still caused him much pain. Chapter 448, Battle Royale. Chapter 448, Battle Royale. Dark Angel _. Sure enough, even if a level 10 spirit tool like the 3 Lives Corpse Casket was triggered, it could only display the battle prowess at the level of the spiritual infant tier. However, in a place like the North region, the spiritual infant tier was already considered the strongest level. A Ronghuan Xian that possessed the 3 Lives Corpse Casket was still the cause of much headache. He only needed to continue hiding in the 3 Lives Corpse Casket and not come out, and really, there might be no one capable of doing anything to him. Wang. However, after receiving the strike of this divine sword, the patterns on the 3 Lives Corpse Casket flickered and immediately formed another Skull Soldier that charged towards the spiritual infant tier cultivator that had delivered the sword strike. This spiritual infant tier cultivator had absolutely no interest in being entangled by the 3 Lives Corpse Casket, and his figure immediately flickered, choosing not to have a face-to-face confrontation with the Skull Soldier. He waved his sword once more and delivered another strike at the 3 Lives Corpse Casket. Ah! Ronghuan Xian once again shouted in pain. The casket allowed him to avoid any direct attacks, but the impact caused by spiritual infant tier-level attacks still caused him a lot of suffering. Another Skull Soldier appeared and charged towards that spiritual infant tier cultivator. Everyone could not help but pale. One attack would cause the appearance of a Skull Soldier. Who could hold up to that? Even the strongest spiritual infant tier cultivator would not be able to stand against the combined forces of so many Skull Soldiers. The second spiritual infant tier cultivator once again dodged and struck in another attack with his divine sword. This naturally led to the appearance of the fourth Skull Soldier. Could there be no limit to the number of Skull Soldiers that this casket could summon? As Ling Han watched on, he thought that there was definitely a limit. But the 3 Lives Corpse Casket was a level 10 spirit tool. A spiritual infant tier cultivator wanted to force it to its limit? That was impossible. They were both level 10 spirit tools, but the 3 Lives Corpse Casket was really very powerful, far surpassing the Demon Birth Sword. It really proves itself to be the imitation of the 3 Lives Corpse Casket of the underworld. Even I feel slightly covetous of it. Tian Zhao murmured to himself. His voice was very low, but Ling Han still managed to hear him. After the second spiritual infant tier cultivator delivered a series of 7 strikes at the 3 Lives Corpse Casket, finally, he was no longer capable of attacking again, because there were already 7 Skull Soldiers ganging up on him, causing him to no longer have the excess energy to attack. Ha 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 ha, you are only a mere spiritual infant tier cultivator, and you want to stand against me? Ronghuan Xian's arrogant laughter sounded very unpleasant to hear. However, the 3 Lives Corpse Casket was indeed very powerful, and they had no choice but to concede that. Ling Han said internally to Small Tower, "Just take a look. He just has a level 10 spirit tool and is already so awesome, whereas I have to behave myself, tucking my tail between my legs. Why is there such a huge disparity?" Small Tower replied calmly, "If you want to, I, too, can display my full power. You can destroy whomever you like as well. Anyways, you're the master, so I obey you." Fuck. Ling Han was only expressing some of his laments. How could he not know revealing the Black Tower would tempt out those really powerful characters? However, Small Tower was really too much of a ruffian, whereas he, on the other hand, almost had his nose bent out of irritation. Why did he feel that this tool spirit was quite a hooligan in essence? There were in total 3 spiritual infant tier cultivators present, and they all made their move respectively, but it only caused the appearance of even more skull soldiers that suppressed them completely. What nonsense, spiritual infant tier cultivators! Wait until I obtain the inheritance in the 12 heaven mystery realms. Then I will return and refine you all into corpse soldiers. Ha 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 ha. Ronghuan Xian laughed uproariously. Who would be able to play around with spiritual infant tier cultivators in the palm of his hand, whilst he himself was only in the spiritual pedestal tier? Only he. All those cultivators of the flower blossom tier and the spiritual infant tier roared in rage. But what could they do? They had no way to break through the defenses of the 3 lives corpse casket. Yet Ling Han nodded internally. In the case of passive defenses, one needed only to be in the deity transformation tier, and would still be able to kill Ronghuan Xian with the impact of one's attacks, even with the 3 lives corpse casket in the way. Of course, that was based on the premise that Ronghuan Xian's cultivation was not in the deity transformation tier yet. This was enough proof of the might of the 3 lives corpse casket. It was merely in a state of passive defense, yet one would still need an attack at the level of deity transformation tier to kill the person hiding within it. Ronghuan Xian continued to propel the 3 lives corpse casket in flight. Some flower blossom tier cultivators were still in pursuit, unwilling to give up the chase, whereas others had already turned around and left. There was nothing they could do to this guy if he continued to hide inside the casket. 10 days later, all the powerful cultivators left helplessly. There was no meaning to continue being obsessed over the casket, because it was obvious that Ronghuan Xian had a spatial ring and did not need to worry that he would starve to death. The only people remaining in pursuit were Ling Han, Hu Niu, and Yin Tian Zhao. Ling Han and Hu Niu chased together, whereas Yin Tian Zhao was on his own. The 3 of them hid themselves as they continued the pursuit. However, when those flower blossom tier and spiritual infant tier cultivators all left, Yin Tian Zhao shot out, and with a great leap, arrived in front of the 3 lives corpse casket. Hand out the key, and I shall spare you, Yin Tian Zhao commanded calmly. You are only in the spiritual pedestal tier. How boldly you speak. Ronghuan Xian came out of the casket and shot a cold smirk at Yin Tian Zhao. When I moved unhindered in this world, who knows where your ancestor was, and you actually dare behave insolently in front of me. Yin Tian Zhao moved directly, aiming to grab Ronghuan Xian. Ling Han did not move. He was afraid that Ronghuan Xian would escape back into the 3 lives corpse casket. In that case, that would be like a tiger trying to bite through a turtle's shell, with no idea where to bite. On the other hand, it would be much easier to snatch the key from Yin Tian Zhao's grasp. What a joke! Ronghuan Xian was naturally fearless and drew out a long saber as he delivered a strike. Though the personal battle prowess of disciples of the Thousand Corpse sect were usually not very strong, there were still exceptions to the rule. For example, Ronghuan Xian had obtained the inheritance of the sect leader, and though he had not managed to get the other level 10 spirit tool, the demonic noise saber, he managed to get a saber technique which could be used together with the demonic noise saber. The grade of this saber technique was not too low, and it could be used as long as one had cultivated corpse chi. How strong this saber technique was would depend on one's achievements in terms of corpse chi cultivation. Thus, Ronghuan Xian still had some level of ability in saber techniques, and formed 5 flashes of saber chi that slashed at Yin Tian Zhao with a single strike of his saber. Yin Tian Zhao neither dodged nor ducked. He stretched open his right hand, and martial intent surged. Multiple green-colored silken threads spread out, and like a net, moved to encircle Ronghuan Xian. Rip apart. Ronghuan Xian declared sharply. His saber chi slashed forth, but this green-colored net was completely unscathed. What? He could not help but be stunned. How could the quality of this person's chi be so far above his own? Ignorant brat. Yin Tian Zhao's large net had already opened up and surrounded Ronghuan Xian completely. Damn it! Ronghuan Xian had not thought that there would be such a huge gap between himself and this man. He hurriedly retreated, intending to duck back into hiding inside the 3 lives corpse casket. I have already moved. Do you still think you can escape? Yin Tian Zhao asked in disdain. Both ends of the green net had already joined together and wrapped around Ronghuan Xian. Ronghuan Xian emitted a roar of rage. Because he had underestimated his foe, he had fallen into such passive circumstances. He expelled a sharp whistle from his mouth. Pong! A figure actually appeared out of the 3 lives corpse casket and charged to attack Tian Zhao. This was a corpse soldier, and there was a shocking hole in its forehead. It was precisely that spiritual infant tear cultivator that had been killed by the 3 lives corpse casket 10 days ago. Now, it had already been refined into a corpse soldier. However, because there had not been enough time, it had not been refined completely and only had the battle prowess of a high-level spiritual pedestal tier cultivator. But there was completely no issue for it to detain Tian Zhao and not allow him a chance to make a move on Ronghuan Xian. Ling Han smiled. It was time for him to make a move. He jumped out and immediately charged out. Without hesitation, he drew the demon birth sword and struck at both Ronghuan Xian and Tian Zhao. Damn it! Ronghuan Xian and Tian Zhao both humphed, but the timing of this strike was too well calculated. It had taken advantage of this particular instant when the two of them were embroiled in a fierce battle and their defenses were at their weakest. Updated by Novel Full. Kamhong. Right at this moment, the 3 lives corpse casket slid over and stood in between Ling Han and Ronghuan Xian. Chapter 449. The Origins of Tian Zhao. Chapter 449. The Origins of Tian Zhao. Pong! The sword flash struck, all of it delivered onto the 3 lives corpse casket. This was a level 10 spirit tool, and very easily managed to block all the damage from Ling Han's strike. Thankfully, the demon birth sword was also a level 10 spirit tool. As a result, it did not evoke a counterattack from the 3 lives corpse casket. But the 3 lives corpse casket was already making a move to cover Ronghuan Xian. As long as Ronghuan Xian hid back inside, then he would once again be invincible. Ling Han, you can't do anything to me. Ronghuan Xian sneered. Since he had seen Hun Yo, how could he not be certain of Ling Han's identity? Hold on. Where was that little girl? He had just seen her just now. Why was there no sign of her now? Ah! He suddenly screamed. He turned to take a look, and Hun Yo's little head had actually appeared in the green net. Furthermore, the corner of her mouth was still bloody. She had actually bitten off 2 of his fingers, and one of them was wearing his spatial ring. No! He immediately shouted loudly. The spatial ring was not worth much, but the problem was that it contained all his possessions, which included the key that he had snatched from the Jian clan. Hee. Hun Yo bared her mouth in a grin. She and Ling Han had coordinated very well. One of them would attack head-on to attract attention, whereas the other would deliver a sneak attack from the side. She forcefully bit through the green net with her bite that had the power of 20 stars of flower blossom tear behind it, and while she was at it, bit off 2 of Ronghuan Xian's fingers as well. She retreated quickly. Pong! The 3 lives corpse casket closed up and swallowed Ronghuan Xian inside. Kill them. Kill all of them. Ronghuan Xian's muffled voice was heard from inside. Losing 2 fingers was no issue. As long as his heart was unscathed, corpse chi could regrow all organs and limbs, but the spatial ring had to be snatched back. Immediately, the corpse soldier turned its focus to Ling Han. Tian Zhao too. With a wave of his right hand, he took back his green net. His eyes turned to Ling Han, filled with frost, and said coldly, "Hand over the key and I can spare your life." Ling Han casually erased the divine sense that Ronghuan Xian had left on the spatial ring. With a sweep of his own divine sense, sure enough, he found that there was a silver key inside. It was made of some kind of unknown material and was as thick as a child's arm. He smiled faintly and simply stored the spatial ring into the black tower. Then, he quickly dodged in a flash, not intending to come into a straight confrontation with the corpse soldier. That was absolutely meaningless. Oh, in the first place, the victor in the battle between you and I has not been decided, and I was precisely planning to have a good, fun battle. If you force me to give it my all, the only path for you is death. Tian Zhao declared coldly. With a wave of his right hand, a flash of green light shot out, which actually transformed into a wing. The wing was exceedingly thin, and like an exceptional heavenly blade, slashed towards Ling Han. Ling Han drew his sword. Ding! When the long sword clashed onto the wing, fierce sparks of fire actually flickered. Upon a closer look, those weren't ordinary sparks, but rather a multitude of patterned designs. What a terrifying Yin Tian Zhao! The martial intent that he delivered was actually on par with a level 10 spirit tool. But it was right at this moment that the corpse soldier waved a claw at Yin Tian Zhao. The command it had received was to kill everyone, and that naturally included Yin Tian Zhao. At first, Yin Tian Zhao was further away from it, so it naturally attacked Ling Han, who was closer first. However, now that Yin Tian Zhao had all of a sudden rushed so close to it, it naturally did not mind attacking him as well. Fuck! Yin Tian Zhao cursed. No matter how glorious his last life had been, he now only had the cultivation level of the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier. There was absolutely no way he could ignore a corpse soldier with flower blossom tier cultivation level, even if it had not been completely refined. He once again shot another attack, but this one was headed towards the corpse soldier. Ling Han rushed forwards, and with a wave of the demon birth sword, 10 flashes of sword chi appeared. The 4 seasons sword technique was already in use, the various concepts moving in a wave like the passage of time. This time, it was now he and the corpse soldier combining forces against Yin Tian Zhao. Yin Tian Zhao was suspected to have been taken over by the spirit of a god. His battle prowess was astonishingly and terrifyingly powerful, and he easily managed to disperse the combined attacks of Ling Han and the corpse soldier. However, the moment Ling Han came near, the corpse soldier turned the focus of its attacks onto Ling Han, making the situation extremely chaotic. The 3 sides were embroiled in a chaotic battle, and Ling Han, as the person who had obtained the key, naturally became the priority target of attack, but the corpse soldier was a standard, double-faced character. If it was able to attack Ling Han, then it would, but if Ling Han was further away from it, it wouldn't just stand idly either. It would accordingly head to attack Yin Tian Zhao, making Yin Tian Zhao feel very gloomy. This ally was really too unreliable. As Hunyo watched from the side, she kept clapping her hands in excitement. She was absolutely confident in Ling Han. After a period of time to accumulate power, Ling Han struck, and the mysterious 3000 technique was out in full glory. 1,000 sword flashes. The 4 seasons sword technique was only a black-grade high-level martial arts technique, but the spiritual pedestal tier could already use earth-grade martial arts techniques, and the mysterious 3000 was a martial arts technique which had a grade surpassing heaven grade, its power only limited by the comprehension that the wielder had about sword arts. In the instant that Ling Han leaped from black grade all the way to surpassing heaven grade, the power of his sword attack naturally soared like crazy. Xiao, xiao, xiao. The 1,000 sword flashes were tightly condensed together, and every single sword flash was equivalent to Ling Han's full power attack. And how shockingly powerful was that? Furthermore, this was an attack that had been delivered with a level 10 spirit tool. Yin Tian Zhao immediately gave a muffled humph, and stretching out both arms, made multiple green threads spread out. This time, they did not form a net, but were far more tightly woven than a net. They actually formed 2 wings that were comprised of pattern designs that shielded him within. The corpse soldier, meanwhile, continued to rush forwards dumbly, and also suffered a major part of the might of the sword flashes. Pong! The sword flashes shattered, which created a large explosion, making for a very terrifying display. When the sword flashes had completely disappeared, the corpse soldier was visibly riddled with holes. Its left arm had been sliced off as well. However, it continued to pounce at Ling Han, possessing absolutely no fear of death. Meanwhile, Yin Tian Zhao was far better off. The wings of light that had protected him had only lost a few feathers, whereas he was completely unscathed. This naturally was also because the majority of the attack had been sustained by the corpse soldier. He had to admit, in terms of the toughness of physique, the corpse soldier was absolutely on par with precious metal and could compare to the body of iron sheet. Furthermore, this was also because this corpse soldier had not been refined completely, and could only be considered as slightly above the level of a level 2 silver-armored corpse soldier, and had yet to reach the stage of level 3. Otherwise, even mysterious 3000 would not be able to inflict any damage to it. After all, this was a technique meant to attack a whole group, whereas 10,000 techniques was the real devastating attack. This is a sword technique from the Heaven Sword Palace. Tian Zhao exclaimed in surprise, his brow slightly frowning. That's not right. There is a Heaven Sword sect here. Could it be that you are a disciple of that place? No, you came from the Rain Country, so there should be no relation between you and the Heaven Sword sect. Could it be that you are the reincarnation of some powerful character from the Heaven Sword Palace? His first words were actually spoken to himself, but his last few words were a question directed at Ling Han. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, I don't have any relation with the Heaven Sword Palace. On the other hand, you, who know of the existence of the Heaven Sword Palace, I assume that you are someone from the realm of gods, then? Realm of gods. Tian Zhao suddenly laughed loudly after a moment of being stunned. With an expression filled with disdain, he said, Ignorant fool of the lower realm, you are ignorant beyond compare. To tell you the truth, I am indeed Tian Zhao. However, when I was young, I accidentally triggered a device which contained the memories of a god, and was thus slightly affected. Ling Han finally understood. Memories were something that should not be trifled with carelessly. Why was he unwilling to use the art of searching another's soul? That was because after he touched the memories of another, they would merge with his own memories. And once there was a large amount of such memories, he would not be able to differentiate which memories were his own, and which belonged to another. It would definitely affect him, and there might even be a great, dramatic change in his character. At that time, Tian Zhao was only 5 years old, and his personal characteristic had yet to be fully formed. How could he then withstand a whole lifetime of memories of a god? As a result, his character naturally changed dramatically. He was practically the carbon copy of that god, and had become incredibly evil. That was why he had been sealed away. Chapter 450. The Dust Has Settled. Chapter 450. The Dust Has Settled. Fuck. From within the Three Lives corpse casket, Ronghuan Xian could be heard cursing. He was really an unlucky one. First, he was possessed by a Jura demon emperor, someone on the par of gods, and now, he encountered a monster that possessed the memories of a god. Moreover, it was very possible that Ling Han had some kind of relation with the ancient era. However, Tian Zhao did not even bother to give him any attention. In his eyes, Ronghuan Xian was naturally the most minor character out of a whole batch of minor characters, and was absolutely unworthy of his notice. He looked at Ling Han seriously and said, Is my sincerity enough? Ling Han, how about this? I don't need you to hand the key over to me, but I want to enter the Sagittarius Palace Hall with you, and take a certain item from inside. When he saw Ling Han frown, he immediately waved his hand and said, Don't worry, this item is absolutely useless to you. He paused a moment, then continued, I can also get rid of the brat inside the casket for you. Others may not be able to do anything to the Three Lives corpse casket, but it has no effect on me. I can drag him out of it. Fuck. Ronghuan Xian cursed again. If it was anyone else saying that, he would naturally scoff in disdain. However, Tian Zhao possessed the memories of a god, and could be considered as the reincarnation of a god, so who knew, he might possibly have a way to deal with the Three Lives corpse casket. Yet Ling Han grinned and answered, No way. Why? Tian Zhao was practically about to go crazy. He had already made enough concessions, yet Ling Han had still rejected his offer. Ling Han said, As for the brat inside the casket, I am indeed unable to kill him now, but it won't take me too many years to be able to drag him out and kill him. It's a good thing to let him live as a reminder to myself. As for that key, it is obviously mine, so why do I need to hand it over to you? Furthermore, even a god would place so much importance on it. TSK, that is even more the reason that I can't miss out on it. Tian Zhao was greatly enraged, and with a sudden leap, charged to attack Ling Han. Since negotiations had failed, the only option left now was to settle things with one's fists. Then you'll just have to see the terrifying battle prowess of our peacock race. Tian Zhao humped frostily. As he waved both arms in attack, wings actually formed. But these wings were 100 feet long and covered with closely woven patterns that shone with glorious light and looked to be extremely terrifying in might. Ling Han used the mysterious 3,000 sword technique. He did not need to spend any time to accumulate power. It was enough for him to deliver 100+ sword flashes with every strike to shatter all the wings that Tian Zhao was shooting at him. The whole area was filled with shattered feathers that immediately transformed into a multitude of patterned designs which then quickly darkened and disappeared. Kill, kill, kill. Tian Zhao's expression became evil beyond compare, and as his figure turned swiftly, it was as if he had really become a gigantic peacock, his wings fluttering violently and murderous intent as far as the eye could see. Ling Han was neither shocked nor afraid. If he used the mysterious 3,000 sword technique, 100 sword flashes would be tossed out, and it was enough for him to stand on equal footing with Tian Zhao. Damn it, I am, after all, no longer in the body of a peacock, and am unable to display the might of the Bright King's secret technique to its fullest. Tian Zhao roared in rage, but the madness in his eyes did not decrease in the slightest and rather seemed to be aroused even further. Give me my key. Hong, green flames actually erupted from his whole body and actually warped the space. Ling Han immediately felt an instant of dizziness. Poison, he thought, quickly drawing out a petal of the golden flower of the stone and swallowed it. Then he turned to look at Hunyeo. Thankfully, the little girl was some distance away, and so had not been surrounded by the flames. However, after he swallowed a petal of the golden flower of the stone, Ling Han felt that the dizziness that he was feeling was under control, but still did not feel any better. It was obvious that even the golden flower of the stone was unable to cleanse the poison of these flames, and could only provide temporary relief. Hiss, what kind of poison could this be, that even the golden flower of the stone, something that was claimed to be able to cleanse 10,000 poisons, could do nothing against it? Ling Han's battle spirit did not decrease, but rather soared. Gripping the demon birth sword, he exclaimed, Tian Zhao, receive a strike from me. Hong, the thunder battle armor was activated and transformed into a barrier that isolated him from the flames. At this moment, the corpse soldier was already rendered mostly useless. It was first heavily damaged by Ling Han's mysterious 3,000 sword technique, followed by Tian Zhao's green flames, so its threat level could now be completely ignored. Thus, Ling Han needed only direct all his focus on Tian Zhao. With a flick of his sword, Ling Han once again used the mysterious 3,000 sword technique. Instantly, 1,000 sword flashes appeared in a wave that hid the sky and covered the earth. Tian Zhao hurriedly stretched open his green wings and shielded himself within. When the sword flashes crashed into them, light from the multiple patterned designs flew everywhere, forcing him into a continuous retreat. When the sword flashes gradually disappeared, the wings that he had used to protect himself were also damaged. When the sword flashes decreased to about 200, the green wings were also completely shattered. Pu, pu, pu. The sword flashes wreaked havoc, and instantly, blood sprayed like crazy. Ling Han was secretly shocked. He really could not underestimate this guy. If it wasn't for the fact that he had increased his original 7 flashes of sword chi to 9 flashes, even the mysterious 3,000 sword technique would not be able to penetrate Tian Zhao's defenses. As Tian Zhao roared in rage, he continued to throw up blood. This time, he had suffered quite a serious injury. Yet it was exactly this moment that Pong, the 3 lives corpse casket opened, and Rong Huan Xin charged out with a direct slash in Tian Zhao's direction. This was the moment that Tian Zhao was at his weakest, and how could he have thought that Rong Huan Xin would actually make a move against him? Thus, he was instantly hit. Pooh! Green-colored blood sprayed everywhere. He had actually been sliced in 2 halves at the waist. You actually attacked me? Tian Zhao wore an expression of absolute disbelief. Nonsense. You yourself said that you can drag me out of the 3 lives corpse casket. Whom else am I going to kill if not you? Ronghuan Xin smirked coldly. In comparison, he could still protect himself with Ling Han, and even if he did not manage to get the treasure inside the 12 Heaven Mystery Realms, it was no great loss to him. It wasn't his in the first place, so naturally he did not feel any bitter anguish about it. Tian Zhao felt very depressed. He had never imagined that someone that could only be considered a mere ant in his eyes would actually cause him such severe injury, but how could he die as easily as this? The upper half and lower half of his body actually moved on their own. One half broke out into a run with 2 legs, whereas the other pushed down onto the ground with both hands. Then with a leap, his upper half landed on top of his lower half, as if they could be attached back. When the mystery realms open, I will definitely stop you. And you, he said to Ling Han first, then pointing at the 3 lives corpse casket. The next time we meet, I will definitely turn you into a corpse. After saying such, he broke out into a run and fled. Hong, 2 green-colored wings of light actually sprouted from his back, and as he stretched them out, he instantly shot into the skies and fled. He didn't die even from that. Ling Han stood with the help of his sword. Tian Zhao could absolutely be considered as the reincarnation of the spirit of an ancient god, and knew a shockingly large number of secret techniques. He didn't die even from being cut in half, so the next time they met, would he have to crush his heart, or perhaps his head? Ling Han, don't be too pleased with yourself. I will get myself a gold-armored corpse, and will definitely take your life next time. Ronghuan Xin also threw out a line that fitted the situation, and was obviously intending to flee. I know. Go on, Ling Han said impatiently. You, Ronghuan Xin humphed. He was extremely displeased with Ling Han's attitude, as if he was some minor character of negligible importance. He swore to himself that he would definitely make Ling Han regret this. Hong, the 3 lives corpse casket slid away, and Ronghuan Xin left inside it. Ling Han, meanwhile, was in deep thought. For Tian Zhao's situation, was he the reincarnation of a god from his last life, or was he still himself? In his case, what category did he belong to then? Was he, too, in the situation that the memories of his last life had been transferred into this body? This caused him to feel it a bit of a loss. Ling Han. Hunyo leaped over and tugged on Ling Han's hand. This made Ling Han instantly break out into a smile, and chased away the confusion in his heart. He was who he was. He was neither the alchemy emperor he had been in his last life, nor was he the useless young man of this lifetime. Rather, he was an existence formed from the merging of these two, possessing both their merits and their shortcomings, a real, living person. And that was enough. Come, let's go back, Ling Han said with a smile. Hunyo nodded in earnestness. Chapter 451. A Noble from the Middle State. Chapter 451. A Noble from the Middle State. On the way back to Extreme Yang City, Ling Han removed his disguise. Thus, when he reached Extreme Yang City, he had naturally regained his identity as the owner of both Forget Not and Alchemist King Pavilion. He had disappeared for 10 days, and Lu Yutong and the others were all very worried. Thankfully, he had finally returned, which relieved their worries. Ling Han went to the Spirit Treasures Pavilion again, thinking that Yin Hong must have finally managed to get the 9-leaf black Anaderma for him by now, right? I'm really sorry. The moment Yin Hong saw him, she hurriedly apologized, which gave Ling Han a feeling of foreboding. Indeed, he heard her continue to say, "That spirit herb that you wanted has been intercepted by another." Who did it? Ling Han's killing intent soared. This spirit herb involved the crucial matter of whether Ling Dongxing would be able to cultivate again, and for this reason, he would not hesitate to commit murder. The details are not very clear yet. They only mention that they sold it to someone by the surname of Tang, and coincidentally, according to my investigation, he has also come to Extreme Yang City, and is currently in the North Pill Pavilion, Yin Hong said. I'm really sorry. I had originally come to an agreement with the seller, but this person with the surname Tang should have a very prominent background. That must be why the seller did not hesitate in offending me, and still adamantly sold the spirit herb to another. I had been intending to communicate with that person with the surname Tang, and see if he would be willing to resell it to me. However, before I even began communicating, you have already rushed here, Yin Hong continued. Ling Han nodded and said, still, thank you. At least, he now knew the rough location of the 9-leaf black Anaderma. You need to take care. This man was able to make the seller refuse to give me face. Either he boasts incredible ability and skill, or has an extremely prominent background, Yin Hong said seriously. I know. Ling Han stood up and left. As Yin Hong watched Ling Han's figure gradually disappear at the main doors to the courtyard, she could not help but support her chin and murmur, that's odd. Is there any great person by the surname of Tang in the North region? Ling Han headed directly to the North Pill Pavilion. Though he was already an Earth-grade alchemist and had already been in Extreme Yang City for a great many days, there were not really that many times that he had ventured here. At most, he had come to select and buy some seeds of spirit herbs to enrich the space in the Black Tower. He made some queries about the person with the surname Tang among the staff in the Pill Pavilion, but every single one of them simply shook their heads, expressing that they did not know either. When he recalled that this person with the surname Tang could have come from a very prominent background, and that it was probably normal that these people at the lower ranks did not know of him, Ling Han decided to find some higher-ranked person and ask, but how could an ordinary person enter into the important areas of the Northern Pill Pavilion? He was just about to reveal his identity as an Earth-grade alchemist when he saw 3 people walk in from outside. 2 of them walked slightly ahead, whereas the third walked a bit further behind. One of the 2 people walking ahead was fully dressed in a simple, elegant white robe with luxuriant black hair and a white silken veil hiding her face. Though there might be uncountable numbers of women who dressed in this way in the world, there was only one person whose mere vague image could make one fantasize endlessly. Zhu Xian. There was a young man by her side who looked to be in his mid-20s and was in the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier. A man with this kind of cultivation level could be considered as one of the top elite prodigies in Extreme Yang City. However, there was an elite cultivator of the flower blossom tier following behind the both of them. He wore an expression of utmost seriousness and followed them closely. From the looks of his attitude, this elite cultivado of the flower blossom tier actually seemed to be the servant of the 2 people walking ahead. Ling Han knew that Zhu Xian definitely did not have that kind of extravagance. Then, that elite cultivator of the flower blossom tier had to be the underling of that young man. However, even in the case of the Winter Moon sect and the Beast Emperor sect, what sect could allow their disciples to make use of a flower blossom tier cultivator as a mere bodyguard cum servant? Flower blossom tier cultivators were definitely a pillar of support for any sect, and it was highly possible that this kind of person could become an ultimate elite cultivator of the spiritual infant tier. This young man appeared to come from an extremely prominent background. When he remembered what Yin Hong had said previously, Ling Han was practically sure that this young man was that person with the surname Tang. Grandmaster Ling. When Zhu Xian saw Ling Han, it was as if she had seen her savior. Her beautiful eyes instantly lit up, and she walked delicately over to him. If you have time, Xian has something that I would like Grandmaster Ling's help on. Grandmaster? When the young man heard this address, he instantly looked disdainful and said, Xian, if you want to learn about alchemy, you can ask me as much as you like. As a black-grade high-level alchemist, I naturally would be able to answer all your questions. This young man was actually a black-grade high-level alchemist? TSK, 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 that was really exceptional. No wonder he was so arrogant. However, if he was merely a black-grade high-level alchemist, he probably was still not qualified to have an elite cultivator of the Flower Blossom tier act as his guard, right? Ling Han turned towards that young man and asked, And who are you? How dare you? You actually dare to speak to young Master Tang in such a tone? That Flower Blossom tier elite cultivator immediately rebuked angrily, his eyes sharp and piercing, filled with killing intent. For a Flower Blossom tier cultivator that had cast off their mortal shell, an angry rebuke accompanied with a fierce glare was naturally filled with power and capable of scaring a spiritual pedestal tier cultivator to their knees. It was naturally a deliberate move on his part. His young master was currently in the process of pursuing Zhu Xian'er, but from the looks of things now, Zhu Xian'er seemed to bear affection for Ling Han. Then, he naturally had to greatly embarrass the latter in front of Zhu Xian'er and humiliate him in front of her. But who was Ling Han? He had a sliver of divine sense left from the heaven tier and furthermore, was a ruler who had formed 9 flashes of qi, so how could he be suppressed by someone else's imposing attitude? He merely picked at his ear and said, "Why are you so vigorously shouting? Your own ears may not be working. So do you think that others are all deaf as well?" Insolence. The flower blossom tier cultivator flew into a powerful rage at his words. A mere spiritual pedestal tier cultivator actually dared to be insolent in front of him. Was he ignorant of the hierarchy of martial arts? How could that be acceptable? Zhu Xian'er hurriedly stopped them and said with absolute seriousness, "This Ling Han, Grandmaster Ling, is an Earth-grade low-level alchemist." What? That flower blossom tier cultivator immediately stared with extremely wide eyes. No matter how he looked at it, Ling Han was only about 18 or 19 years old, and he was already an Earth-grade alchemist? One had to know that even for a genius like young Master Tang, he was only a black-grade high-level alchemist. Though there was only the gap of a single level between black-grade high-level and Earth-grade low-level, this gap was enough to make one lose all hope for his entire lifetime, as it was a gap he could forever be unable to breach. So what if you are an Earth-grade alchemist? The young man merely sneered coldly. In front of me, even an Earth-grade high-level alchemist is not enough. Brat, get out of here immediately. Otherwise, I will have you die. Ling Han did not get angry, but rather smiled and asked calmly, "I don't think I have offended you in any way, have I? You spoke to Xian'er without getting permission from me, and that is your sin," the young man said coldly. Yet Zhu Xian'er was irritated and asked, "What relation is there with you whomever I speak to?" "Of course there's relation." The young man laughed lightly. "I have my eye on you. And since you're my woman, then naturally, no other man is allowed to speak to you. If they did, then they would merely be seeking death." "Don't you speak nonsense," Zhu Xian'er rebuked furiously. However, the young man merely laughed loudly and said, "I heard that Yao Hui Yu also has his eye on you, and it was because I heard that I deliberately raced all the way here from the Middle State. I wanted to take a look for myself what kind of magnificent beauty was capable of moving the heart of that sword maniac. That bastard is always against me, and though I can't compare to him in terms of martial arts, I can snatch away the woman that he admires. Ha 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 ha, I really want to see his expression when he finds out." "Dream on." Zhu Xian'er humphed icily. "Is it?" A contemplative smile played about the young man's lips. "Didn't you want to concoct a heaven-grade alchemical pill? There are only 2 heaven-grade alchemists in the whole of the Middle State, and one of them is my great-grandfather. On what basis do you intend to have a heaven-grade alchemist concoct alchemical pills for you? In the case of our Tang clan, we have concocted alchemical pills for multiple generations, and the amount of wealth we have accumulated over the years is incredibly terrifying. So what kind of bargaining chip can you offer that would make my great-grandfather interested? Unless you become my woman, and I will beg my great-grandfather to concoct an alchemical pill on your behalf." Chapter 452. The Descendant of a Disciple. Chapter 452. The Descendant of a Disciple. The surname Tang, and an aristocratic clan of alchemists. Ling Han was slightly startled. At first, he had not thought much about the surname Tang, but his heart was lightly moved when he heard aristocratic clan of alchemists. He asked, "Is there someone called Tang Xiaoyuan in your family line?" "What Tang Xiaoyuan?" At first, the young man humphed, but then, an expression of astonishment immediately appeared on his face, and he asked, "How did you know the name of my clan's founder?" Fuck, he really was. Ling Han thought. In his last life, he had a total of 4 disciples. 2 studied martial arts under him, whereas the other 2 studied alchemy, and one of his 2 alchemy disciples was named Yun Yongwang, whereas the other was called Tang Xiaoyuan. This was a descendant of one of his disciples. Fuck, this was really deceiving one's master and eliminating one's ancestor. Ling Han humphed and said, "That is not something you should bother with. On the basis of your ancestor, kneel down and apologize. Then hand the 9-leaf black Ganoderma over, and I will not lower myself to your level and call you to accounts. How dare you? The young man was so furious, his nose was bent out of shape. I, Tang Zuming, am already considerably arrogant, but compared with you, I find that I am actually quite modest. Gao Feng, kill him. The last few words were directed at the flower blossom tier elite cultivator behind him. This man had the surname of Zhao, with the given name of Gao Feng. There was naturally no shortage of powerful cultivators willing to follow a heaven-grade alchemist. If it wasn't for the fact that there was a barrier separating the middle state and the north region, he would have definitely brought a deity transformation tier ultimate elite cultivator with him who would be able to sweep aside all opposition in the whole north region single-handedly. How awesome would that be? Young Master Tang, this person is an earth-grade alchemist. Zhuo Gaofeng was slightly hesitant. In the whole world, there were only 2 heaven-grade alchemists, and as a result, earth-grade alchemists were already very impressive. Furthermore, Ling Han was still so young, and in future, who knows, he might be able to become a great boss of alchemy whose mighty reputation could suppress the whole world. What are you afraid of? My great-grandfather is a heaven-grade alchemist. Tang Zuming declared arrogantly. Zhuo Gaofeng was no longer hesitant. Heaven-grade alchemist was the most awesome existence in this world that could stand on equal footing with shattering void-tier cultivators, and they could be claimed to be the leaders of all the alchemists of this world. In that case, so what if he killed an earth-grade alchemist? He would not need to ask another alchemist to concoct alchemical pills for him, and there was absolutely no need for him to take anyone else into account. Die! He immediately struck and delivered an attack in Ling Han's direction. Stop! Zhu Xian'er was extremely shocked. She had originally intended to speak with Ling Han deliberately and put up a pretense of intimacy between the two of them so that Tang Zuming would leave on his own initiative. She had never thought that this Tang Zuming was really a typical profligate young master, arrogant and unreasonable, that would actually attempt to have Ling Han killed. The cause of this trouble was her, and she immediately leaped out to stand between Ling Han and Zhuo Gaofeng. However, in front of a flower blossom tier cultivator, what use would her paltry power be? Zhuo Gaofeng merely crooked his fingers slightly, and Zhu Xian'er was gently pushed to one side and also had her cultivation sealed. This attack from Zhuo Gaofeng meanwhile continued on its path with practically no hindrance towards Ling Han. Pong! Ling Han was instantly sent flying. He actually tore a hole into 7 consecutive walls as he flew before finally stopping. Not dead yet? Zhuo Gaofeng looked surprised. Right before the power of his attack impacted him, this brat actually had a defensive armor which exuded the divine light of thunder, and it was this that blocked the majority of his attack. And it was precisely because of this that Ling Han was only sent flying, and possibly had a few bones broken, spat out several mouthfuls of blood, but was adamantly not dead. This was extremely shocking. A grand elite cultivator of the flower blossom tier moved, and was actually unable to kill a mere junior in the spiritual pedestal tier with a single strike. Who dares to make trouble in our North Pill Pavilion? A cold humph was heard. Previously, Ling Han and the others were only engaged in a verbal battle, and the North Pill Pavilion would naturally not take this into account. However, now that they had broken out into a fight, and actually caused some damage to the Pill Pavilion, this would of course lure out the elite cultivators in the North Pill Pavilion. Young Master Tang? Zhuo Gaofeng turned around and looked at Tang Zuming in question. Continue. Tang Zuming commanded coldly, and then called out loudly, I am Tang Zuming, and my great-grandfather is a heaven-grade alchemist from the Middle State, Grandmaster Tang Zishe. Whoever dares to interfere would be standing on opposite sides of our Tang clan. He drew out a token. An ordinary person would naturally not recognize what it was, but every Earth-grade alchemist would be very familiar with it. That was a token that indeed belonged to Grandmaster Tang Zishe. All of a sudden, it was as if all the powerful cultivators in the North Pill Pavilion had been frozen as a whole. In fact, no one actually dared to voice out anything anymore. What more to step out and make a move to stop them? Tang Zishe, Grandmaster Tang, that was one of the 2 great pillars of support of the Alchemist Society. For the alchemists in the Alchemist Society or martial artists, This was a god that stood high up on a pedestal that they could only kneel down and look up to in reverence. Peng, peng, peng. Zhuo Gaofeng continued to pursue Ling Han with much satisfaction, feeling extremely pleased with himself. Though he was in the flower blossom tier, he was definitely not considered one of the elite cultivators in the middle state. At most, he could only be considered one of the more powerful cultivators, but here, he was definitely a top-tier elite cultivator. Furthermore, with the golden badge of protection of a heaven-grade alchemist shielding him, absolutely no one dared to stop him. In the north region, he could do as he desired. This feeling gave him extremely great pleasure. Zhu Xian'er's cultivation was sealed, but this did not stop her from speaking. She called out loudly, "The one being pursued is Ling Han, Grandmaster Ling, an Earth-grade low-level alchemist." What? This time, quite a number of those who chose to remain silent wavered. On the basis of a heaven-grade alchemist's backing, you, Zhuo Gaofeng, could commit a crime, and they would be unable to do anything but bear with it. But if you wanted to kill an alchemist, then the significance would be completely different. Why was the Alchemist Society established? It was precisely to protect the rights and benefits of alchemists, to form a colossal alliance that would make no martial artist dare to treat them lightly. And it was exactly this reason that allowed alchemists to have a detached status above others. But to pursue and attempt to kill an alchemist in the Alchemist Society, what kind of preposterous matter was that? If it was Tang Zishe personally acting, then naturally no one would dare to convince him to do otherwise. But now, a mere flower blossom tier cultivator actually dared to attempt to kill an alchemist. What more when the latter was an earth-grade alchemist? This naturally aroused public indignation. Today, you could make an attempt to kill Ling Han, then tomorrow, wouldn't you also be able to attempt killing me as well? Immediately, a terrifying aura spread out and forcefully suppressed Zhuo Gaofeng. The one who acted was a consecrated person of the North Pill Pavilion. He was an elite cultivator of the spiritual infant tier and had the surname of Shi. Not many knew his real name, and others all addressed him as Elder Shi. You dare! You dare! Yet Tang Zuming erupted into a thunderous rage. You actually dare to stop me from killing someone I want to kill. Are you not afraid that I will fly into a rage and have this place demolished in my fury? Ling Han strode back, his face filled with fury. He had seen a considerable number of profligate spoilt young masters, but to be willful to such an extreme extent, Tang Zuming should be the only one. Just because his ancestor was a heaven-grade alchemist, he was actually arrogant to such an exaggerated level. Hung, the North Pill Pavilion is not a place for you to do as you like. Get lost. Elder Shi humphed. Tang Zuming's eyes turned, and he suddenly said, "Old man, you have already been stuck in the spiritual infant tier for a great many years, haven't you? Let my guess, firstly, you do not have a level 8 martial arts technique, and secondly, you are not strong enough to accumulate enough power and are thus unable to batter through the barrier into the deity transformation tier. However, if you help me kill this brat, I can gift you with a level 8 martial arts technique, as well as a Heaven's Heart Void pill to help you strengthen your foundations and bank up your origin power to accumulate enough energy to break through." What? Elder Shi instantly exclaimed in a trembling voice. His interest had been aroused. Chapter 453, A Heaven-Grade Alchemist. So what? Chapter 453, A Heaven-Grade Alchemist. So what? Elder Shi was an assigned protector of the North Pill Pavilion, and had been protecting this place for close to 100 years. Because he had not ventured to the middle state in his youth, by the time he was old, it was even less possible for him to go there. The transfer barrier would not only weaken his cultivation, it could even shake the very essence of his life. He no longer had any grand ambitions or lofty aspirations, and only desired to spend the rest of his life here in peace. Yet Tang Zuming's words caused his heart to throb wildly. A level 8 martial arts technique, the Heaven Heart Void, to strengthen his foundations and help him cultivate origin power. This allowed him to see hope that he could break through to the deity transformation tier. If he could break through to the deity transformation tier, then he would gain another 200 years of life. Who did not want to live for a few more years? What more when it was a whole 200? That was more than double the lifetime of an ordinary person, Old Sure, your heart has been thrown into disorder. A calm voice rang out. It sounded very clear, but when one heard closely, it was filled with age. This was the real big boss of the North Pill Pavilion, Earth-grade mid-level alchemist, Gongyang Tai-sun, who was also a powerful cultivator of the spiritual infant tier. He actually had hopes of attempting to break through to the deity transformation tier. Unfortunately, he had spent too much of his energy on alchemy. As a result, his energy reserves were all dried up, and he no longer had the energy left to make an attempt to break through to a higher cultivation level. Elder Shi gave a humph and declared, "Brother Gongyang, you have devoted yourself entirely to alchemy, and I am very impressed with your dedication. However, this could possibly be the one and only hope I have to break through, so I would kindly request you not to stop me." Ho ho, Old Shi, you are a protector of our North Pill Pavilion. You've received money from our Alchemist Society, yet intend to turn around and hunt down one of our alchemists. Nothing so wonderful exists in this world. Gongyang Tai-sun's voice rang out again. Then, Brother Gongyang, I shall resign from the position of protector of the North Pill Pavilion. Elder Shi declared bluntly. How could a man who had managed to cultivate all the way to the spiritual infant tier be one who would worry incessantly about personal gains and losses? Gongyang Tai-sun sighed and said, "They are mere empty words, and you would simply trust his word like this? Hung, there is no way that he would dare to deceive me." Elder Shi said very confidently. Is that right? Gongyang Tai-sun shook his head. Old Shi, even the wisest can have a momentary lapse in judgment. With the barrier separating our respective regions, do you think you'd be able to chase him all the way to the middle state? Furthermore, spiritual infant tier cultivators could only be considered as one of the elite in the middle state, but definitely not as one of the top elite. Elder Shi could not help but be rendered speechless. In the North region, there was indeed no one who would dare deceive him, but what if this Tang brat ran all the way back to the middle state and did not return? Furthermore, he was the descendant and junior of a heaven-grade alchemist, so if he really intended to hide, would Elder Shi even dare to race to his residence and demand repayment for the favor that he had done for the former? Please don't worry, Elder Shi. I, Tang Zuming, hereby swear that I will definitely fulfill my promise. Otherwise, may lightning strike me dead where I stand. Tang Zuming quickly declared. He was a spoilt young master, he was arrogant, he was also overbearing, but he was definitely no idiot. Even if his cultivation level could be increased with the use of alchemical pills, his status as a black-grade high-level alchemist was something that he had obtained with genuine ability after all. Elder Shi cackled wildly and declared, "Brother Gongyang, I don't want to become your enemy, so I would also like to ask you not to oppose me." Huh. Do you all think that you surely have an upper hand over me? Ling Han spoke up. He strode over, the thunder battle armor he was wearing exuding multiple rings of lightning, making him appear extremely mighty. "You are definitely going to die today," Tang Zuming declared coldly. His greatest strength was making use of his own identity and throwing the various resources he possessed at others. Beautiful women would willingly undress for him, prodigies would bow their heads in respect, and enemies would naturally have a tragic end. Ling Han smiled calmly and said, "Don't you just have a heaven-grade alchemist as an ancestor? And what's so awesome about that? Brother Gongyang, please help me make preparations. I want to test as a heaven-grade alchemist." When they heard Ling Han address Gongyang Tai-sun as brother, a great number of people gaped. Was this young man really unafraid of death? Did he not know that the only person who could stop Elder Shi in the entire North Pill Pavilion was Gongyang Tai-sun? A little Earth-grade low-level alchemist like you was on a completely different plane from an Earth-grade mid-level alchemist, and this gap could possibly be breached only after several dozens of years, or it could even be completely hopeless for him to breach this gap in this lifetime. And he actually dared to address Gongyang Tai-sun as brother. This was a show of absolute disrespect to his seniors. However, when they heard his last few words, everyone instantly turned to stone. This guy actually wanted to be certified as a heaven-grade alchemist? Fuck. This was an absolutely impossible thing. Putting aside whether Ling Han had that kind of skill or not, only the middle state had heaven-grade ingredients. Thus, even if Tang Zishe came, it would be completely useless. At most, even he could only be certified as an earth-grade high-level alchemist here. Don't worry, I have my own ingredients, Ling Han stated calmly. In the Alchemist Society, it was absolutely not allowed for anyone to stand in the way of a man attempting to be certified as a high-level alchemist. Even a heaven-grade alchemist was no exception. As a result, Gongyang Tai-sun only stared blankly for a moment, then said, "Prepare an alchemy chamber." Elder Shi also looked slightly surprised, and hesitant as well. However, as long as Gongyang Tai-sun was insistent on shielding Ling Han, then he would definitely not be able to do anything to Ling Han in the North Pill Pavilion. That was because this Pill Pavilion had a magnificent great array in place, and once fully activated, it could even display might equivalent to a deity transformation tier cultivators. This was also one of the reasons why the Alchemist Society remained strong and steady. In the northern region, the strongest level was merely spiritual infant tier, and would they be able to stand against a great array at the level of deity transformation tier? Thankfully, Elder Shi was familiar with the workings of this great array. Thus, he was certain that he could escape alive from this great array. But to also kill Ling Han under such conditions? That was merely a fantasy. Thus, he merely engaged in a verbal argument with Gongyang Tai-sun, hoping that the latter would make concessions. Haha, I'm really going to laugh myself to death, a mere earth-grade low-level alchemist, and you actually want to certify as a heaven-grade alchemist. Tang Zuming laughed uproariously. However, the other people all disliked his arrogance and obnoxious behavior, so only Zhuo Gaofeng have him some face and laughed with him. All right, follow me. Gongyang Tai-sun cast a deep, meaningful look at Ling Han. This young man was really much too young. At the time, when the request for certification came from the Star Brilliance Palace Hall, he was in absolute disbelief. As a result, Ling Han had left a very deep impression on him. By now, he had naturally accepted the reality that Ling Han was an earth-grade alchemist, but when he heard Ling Han say he wanted to be certified as a heaven-grade alchemist at this moment, 10,000 profanities still streaked through his mind. You are merely an earth-grade low-level alchemist. How far was the gap from earth-grade low-level to heaven-grade alchemist? It was not 3 levels, but rather an endless chasm. Similarly to how black-grade high-level alchemists had a 99% chance of never being able to advance to earth-grade alchemists in their lifetime, earth-grade high-level alchemists also had a 999% chance of never being able to break through to heaven-grade. There were only 2 heaven-grade alchemists in this whole world, okay? Ling Han obviously only declared his intention to certify as a heaven-grade alchemist because he was provoked. No matter how he looked at it, Ling Han was merely being rash, so how could he possibly succeed? To concoct heaven-grade alchemical pills, without any sort of exaggeration, even Tang Zishe and Nong Bo Xian had to concentrate and calm their hearts, as well as fast for 3 or 4 days before finally starting to concoct heaven-grade alchemical pills. How could they be successfully concocted if the alchemist was in a state of agitation? He really wanted to stop Ling Han so that he would not waste his heaven-grade ingredients. But there was no way he could do so. Every single alchemist had the right to be certified as a higher-level alchemist, and not even he was allowed to take that right away. The alchemy chamber was prepared, and as Ling Han strode over to it, a great commotion arose in the North Pill Pavilion. Someone was going to be certified as a heaven-grade alchemist. This was an absolutely inconceivable feat in the North region, because even though there have been heaven-grade alchemists from the North region in the past, every single one of them succeeded in breaking through and was certified in the middle state, and never once returned to the North region afterwards. Now, there was actually someone who intended to certify as a heaven-grade alchemist in the North region? Fuck, they definitely had to go and see that. Chapter 454, Opening the Furnace and Concocting Pills. Chapter 454, Opening the Furnace and Concocting Pills. Ling Han had indeed decided to certify as a heaven-grade alchemist on an impulse. An 18-year-old heaven-grade alchemist was too dazzling a presence. Furthermore, he had yet to build up his own power base. If some sect like the Winter Moon sect or the Beast Emperor sect secretly kidnapped and imprisoned him to force him to concoct alchemical pills, What was he to do? On the surface, there was indeed no one who would dare do anything damaging to a heaven-grade alchemist, but in secret, he. After all, in this whole world, there were only 2 heaven-grade alchemists. Ling Han possessed the Black Tower, and it was indeed enough to allow him to protect himself. But if the secret of the Black Tower was leaked, he could possibly encounter even more trouble. Just look, hadn't the Thousand Corpse sect already taken note of him? However, for his father's sake, Ling Han chose to be rash. He definitely needed to obtain the 9-leaf black Anaderma so that he could concoct the Restore Spirit pill. The problem now was, could he actually concoct heaven-grade alchemical pills? After all, he now only had a spiritual pedestal tier cultivation level, and in theory, the highest grade he could concoct would be Earth-grade mid-level pills. With the strange fire thrown into the mix, Earth-grade high-level pills should be no problem, but heaven-grade it was a matter of chance. He could only hope that Small Fire had been terribly trained enough in the Black Tower, and thus had a big power upgrade. Otherwise, there was really a chance he could fail. Losing face was not that important, but the important thing here would be that he would not be able to snatch back the 9-leaf black Anaderma. Ling Han gathered his scattered thoughts and drew out a stalk of Spirit Heart Heaven spring bamboo from within the Black Tower. This was a spirit herb that could be used to concoct the most commonly seen Return Origin pill, which was used to replenish origin power. However, the Spring Heart Heaven spring bamboo was used to concoct a high-grade Return Origin pill. A 10-year-old herb could allow a spiritual infant tier cultivator to instantly recover 1/10 of his origin power. A 100-year-old one was effective for a deity transformation tier cultivator, whereas a 1,000-year-old herb could be used by a heaven tier cultivator. Ling Han obtained a 100-year-old Spirit Heart Heaven spring bamboo in the Devil Sky Mystery Realm which, after close to a year of growing in the Black Tower, had now reached 1,000 years old, and could now be used to concoct the highest grade Return Origin pill. An alchemical pill that was to be used by a heaven tier cultivator was naturally a heaven-grade alchemical pill. Though heaven-grade alchemical pills could also be categorized into low, mid, and high-level pills, because the pill grade was too high, heaven-grade low-level pills were directly referred to as heaven-grade. Heaven-grade mid-level pills were called saint-grade, and heaven-grade high-level pills were called immortal-grade. Saint-grade alchemical pills were effective for shattering void tier cultivators, whereas immortal-grade pills truly did not belong to this world. In his last life, Ling Han could concoct out saint-grade alchemical pills, and had touched a bit on immortal-grade alchemical pills as well. He had even found some substitute ingredients and managed to concoct pseudo-immortal-grade alchemical pills, which also proved that his talent in alchemy was unparalleled in both ancient and modern times, and was extremely awesome. The name of Alchemy Emperor was not something that had come from mere praise, but had been obtained through genuine talent and skill. Those 2 heaven-grade alchemists of the middle state should be heaven-grade low-level alchemists. A great lapse in the passing down of alchemical knowledge had absolutely no relation with how prosperous the environment was for martial arts, and there was no way they could become saint-grade. Though heaven-grade Return Origin pill was the most common kind and most worthless heaven-grade alchemical pill, no matter how ordinary or trashy it was still a heaven-grade alchemical pill. It could not be concocted by any kind of earth-grade alchemist, and would be more than enough for him to pass the certification. More importantly, he did not have any other heaven-grade ingredients. Ling Han began to sort the ingredients. The Spirit Heart Heaven spring bamboo was the main ingredient, but other supplementary ingredients were needed as well. His movements were natural and smooth, making all those alchemists who were observing him from outside dumbfounded. Sorting out ingredients could actually be done so elegantly, and actually seemed so beautiful. Zhu Xin'er's heart throbbed loudly. Though she had been called the greatest beauty of the North region, and one of the strongest of the younger generation, if you were to ask her if she could actually speak with a heaven-grade alchemist, then that would be mere fantasy for her. In the whole middle state, there were only 2 heaven-grade alchemists, and their status could be considered to be on par with shattering void tier ultimate elites. Was she qualified to converse with an ultimate elite cultivator of the shattering void tier? Of course not. Thus, Tang Zuming's threat and temptation was extremely effective. If she wanted to ask those 2 heaven-grade alchemists to concoct alchemical pills, making her request through their younger descendants was the most effective method. Otherwise, Zhu Xian could only wait until she had developed to the level that even heaven-grade alchemists would have to give her some face-the-shattering void tier. Setting aside the question whether Zhu Xian would be able to advance to the shattering void tier, even if she could, when would that be? But if Ling Han could successfully become a heaven-grade alchemist, Zhu Xian's heart throbbed uncontrollably. She should be considered Ling Han's friend, right? And since they were friends, then helping her out should not be anything too difficult for him, right? In this moment, she hoped tremendously that Ling Han could succeed. Tang Zuming sneered. There were a total of 27 Earth-grade high-level alchemists in the middle state, and they have been barraging the doorstep to become a heaven-grade alchemist for a whole 100 years, but ultimately, none managed to take this final step. What was the reason for that? That one step was much too hard to breach. An 18-year-old youngster wanted to succeed. That was really much too naive of him. However, he was still quite astonished by Ling Han's movements, because he, too, was a genius alchemist who was already a black-grade high-level alchemist in his mere 20s, which was proof enough of his extraordinary talent in alchemy. Ling Han's movements were much too practiced and made him feel inferior. He even had the thought to stealthily learn, but looking at how his movements seemed blurred to the eye, he had absolutely no idea where to begin stealthily learning from. At first, it was quite noisy, but an absolute silence had fallen over them all in this moment. They were all watching Ling Han quietly. The rhythm of his movements actually caused a powerful resonance to arise in all of them, as if something was about to gush out from within their bodies. After sorting the ingredients, Ling Han entered into the purification stage. Those amazing movements of his naturally caused his audience to be shocked and stunned, and quite a number even exclaimed in surprise, but they were quickly silenced by multiple disdainful looks from their companions. The most important stage was here, and that was the pill concoction stage. No matter how beautifully you sorted the ingredients, or how amazingly you had purified them, if you were not able to concoct the alchemical pill, then everything would be worthless. Ling Han sharpened his focus and calmed his emotions. Then he summoned the strange fire and thought, "Small fire, it's up to you now." Hong, a crimson-red flame suddenly arose. If one looked closely enough, there was actually a small spot of purple in the heart of the flame, making it appear out of the ordinary. Ling Han was surprised. Small fire was indeed very different from before. Compared to how it was early on, after small fire swallowed another strange fire, there would indeed be a great power upgrade, but the greater change should have originated from being upgraded by the Black Tower, making it really experience a true rebirth. Heaven-grade alchemical pill, there was hope. The flames roared fiercely, and the light of the fire shone brilliantly. No way, to use such a powerful flame right from the very beginning, isn't he afraid that he would lose control? That's right, the furnace could explode at any moment. Immediately, a great number of people began to shake their heads. Ling Han's skill in sorting out the ingredients and purifying them made them feel ashamed of their inferiority, but his skill in pill concoction, AI, it was really a bit poor. Such a person managed to become an Earth-grade alchemist too? Probably mere boasting. Though many aged, serious-looking elders did not say a thing, their eyes revealed their disappointment. At first, they had really thought that Ling Han was slightly assured of his success based on how aggressive and confident he had been. They had never thought that it was a mere show of false bravado from him. AI? The latter was only a youngster, so why had they, for some unknown reason, placed their faith in him? What a joke. The furnace fire burned fiercely, reaching all the way to ceiling, forcing Ling Han to have no choice but to activate his thunder battle armor to withstand such extreme heat. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, time passed extremely quickly. So much time has already passed, but why has the furnace not exploded yet? That's right. It's at least been 3 hours, so shouldn't it have long since exploded? Could it be that there is some hope for success? Impossible. I would guess that the ingredients he used were not heaven-grade in the first place, and he is simply concocting a false heaven-grade alchemical pill. Hey. He couldn't have been so reckless, could he? The spectators all discussed spiritedly, whereas Tang Zuming simply broke out into uproarious laughter. How could heaven-grade alchemical pills be so easily concocted? Ling Han must have failed early on, and was merely adamant on not admitting his defeat now. He had to be merely putting on a farce now for the sake of his pride. Chapter 455, Appearance of the Pill Tribulation. Chapter 455, Appearance of the Pill Tribulation. Another 3 hours passed. Lord Gongyang, what are we to do? Someone asked Gongyang Tai-sun for guidance. What do you mean, what are we to do? Certification as a heaven-grade alchemist can last for 3 days and 3 nights. Only 6 hours have passed by now, and you're asking me what we are to do? Could it be that you think that I will step out to stop him? Gongyang Tai-sun huffed. That person smiled sheepishly as he thought, doesn't everyone already know that Ling Han had already failed? So what is the point of continuing to waste everyone's feelings? Let's go, let's go. There's nothing much to see here. That's right. Let's all just go back, embrace our wives, and sleep. You speak as if you actually have a wife. Pei, believe it or not, I'll embrace your wife and sleep. The crowds quickly dispersed, and there were only a few servants left behind outside. A spoilt young master like Tang Zuming naturally was short of patience. Otherwise, with a great-grandfather that was a heaven-grade alchemist, he might have already advanced into earth-grade by now. He released a yawn and said, Gao Feng, stand guard here. I'm going to go back and sleep. Look closely. You must definitely not allow this brat to escape. The moment 3 days have passed, I want to personally kill him. Yes, young master. Zhao Gao Feng replied respectfully. Tang Zuming once again snickered in Zhu Xian'er's direction. He was sure that this beauty would very soon concede to his will and obediently undress herself before pleasing him on the bed. He could not help but shudder in anticipation, feeling slightly impatient. In fact, he wanted very much to immediately force himself upon her right this very instant. There was no need to rush. This beautiful creature was destined to be served up on his plate. For spiritual pedestal tier cultivators, as long as they had not engaged in fierce battle, it would be no problem for them to endure a wait that could last over 10 days and all the way up to half a month. Thus, Zhu Xian'er and Zhao Gao Feng both stood guard outside the alchemy chamber. Aside from the two of them, Elder Shi and Gongyang Tai-sun were there as well, and together with a number of earth-grade alchemists, there were in total about 10 people still waiting. 1 day passed, 2 days passed, and Ling Han was still endlessly embroiled in the pill concoction process. Furthermore, more and more people had once again returned to the alchemy chamber. Ling Han appeared not to have failed yet. They could clearly see that while Ling Han was concocting the alchemical pills, he drew out multiple patterns from the alchemy furnace, and after making slight adjustments, shot them back onto the furnace. Those were the patterns that belonged to the various ingredients within the alchemy furnace, and carried with them the essence of nature which formed natural patterns. Pill concoction involved merging these various patterns in a specific way and, ultimately, creating a shocking effect from them. However, the manipulation of these patterns that belonged to the ingredients would only be used in the process of concocting a heaven-grade alchemical pill. When they saw how these patterns fluttered, as well as Ling Han's practiced, beautiful movements, all the alchemists felt their hair stand on ends in their extreme shock. This youngster was really concocting a heaven-grade alchemical pill. Crap. Furthermore, the furnace had not yet exploded even though 2 whole days had passed. Instead, the divinity and essence of the ingredients had been slowly extracted and revealed the most intrinsic patterns. This showed that Ling Han was still proceeding smoothly and successfully up till this point. This WSS really too astonishing. Could it be that he would really succeed? All of them were unsure. In alchemy, the last part was the hardest to finish. No one could be sure whether it was successful if it was not the very last moment. If there was a mistake at any one stage, it could lead to a fatal failure. Moreover, the manipulation of patterns in order to ensure that the ingredients could interact and resonate with one another was the very hardest step in this lengthy process. One mistake and the whole endeavor would be a loss. However, in Ling Han's case, he was extremely relaxed by this point. He was the alchemy emperor. What level had he been at in his last life? Saint grade. He had even concocted pseudo-immortal-grade alchemical pills, so it would not be an exaggeration to consider him to be a pseudo-immortal-grade alchemist. The only thing he lacked was the ability to raise the maximum heat level of his flames, and aside from this, there was naturally nothing else he had left to fear. He moved confidently, his 10 fingers moving as if he was strumming the strings of a Jian one. So relaxed and smooth were his movements. One after another, patterns appeared, and he adjusted every single one of them before throwing them back into the alchemy furnace. The patterns corresponded to the changes in the medicinal effects of the contents of the alchemy furnace, and with his adjustment, they melded together and headed in the direction that he wanted them to go. Sometimes, Ling would even close his eyes, as if he had once again returned to his last life. Heaven-grade alchemical pills were a piece of cake, and Saint-grade alchemical pills were no big issue, either. Considering the level that Ling had grasped alchemy in his last life, as long as he was given real immortal-grade alchemical pills, he might even be able to concoct immortal-grade alchemical pills. Hey, did I see wrongly? Why do I feel like I saw him close his eyes just now? I saw that too. Fuck, is this guy a freak or something? He can actually be so inattentive even in the midst of concocting a heaven-grade alchemical pill? The spectators all erupted into a shocked clamor. They had really been astonished by Ling actions. Ling movements became increasingly skillful. He knew every step like it was the back of his hand. His fingers seemed to have a spirit of their own and twisted the unique nature of each ingredient easily, moving in a relaxed and pleasurable manner. As the time limit for the 3 days neared, more and more patterns steamed out of the alchemy furnace. Merely a glance was enough to turn the faces of the Earth-grade alchemists green, yet Ling was absolutely unconcerned. The movements of his hands sped up correspondingly in an organized, amazingly calm manner. Tang Zuming had once again returned, and when he saw this scene, he could not help but wear a dark expression. Even if Ling failed in his next step, this kind of standard was really close to heaven-grade. An 18-year-old quasi-heaven-grade alchemist. That was too horrifying. Finally, Ling had forced back every single pattern into the alchemy furnace, and no other emerged. The time was also close to the end of the 3-day-long process. Suddenly a dark cloud appeared in the middle of what had been clear skies. There had been absolutely no warning, and within the cloud, lightning flashed closely together, making a loud crackling noise. It's said that when a heaven-grade alchemical pill has been successfully concocted, a thunder tribulation would befall it so as to prevent it from leaving the alchemy furnace. This means that Ling has really concocted heaven-grade alchemical pills? Otherwise, how could he have possibly drawn out a calamity of thunder? However, this is also the very hardest step. If the alchemical pills concocted are not up to standard, then they would be turned to ash by this thunder tribulation. But if they were up to standard, they would absorb the power of heaven's Tao in it and truly come to possess heaven-grade effects. If a deity transformation tier cultivator swallowed a heaven-grade alchemical pill, even he would explode and die. There would be no way he could withstand the power of heaven's Tao. But will we be affected by the thunder tribulation too? All their expressions turned a bit dark. They had never before experienced it. They had never even witnessed one actually taking place. They had only heard of its occurrence through hearsay. Retreat. Retreat. Gongyang Tai-sun's expression changed drastically. As an Earth-grade mid-level alchemist, he was naturally aware that the moment a heaven-grade alchemical pill left the alchemy furnace, a thunder tribulation would be drawn out. That was not something to play around with. All of them hurriedly fled in all directions. Everyone was now sure by now that Ling was indeed concocting heaven-grade alchemical pills. Otherwise, there was no way he would have drawn out a thunder tribulation. Then as long as the alchemical pill withstood it, Ling would be a genuine heaven-grade alchemist. Even if it did not manage to withstand the might of thunder, he was still qualified to be considered a quasi-heaven-grade alchemist. Elder Shi and Zhao Gaofeng's faces turned slightly green. Though one of them was in the spiritual infant tier while the other was in flower blossom tier. If they really opposed a heaven-grade alchemist, at any instant, Others could tear them apart into multiple pieces so small that not even bones remained. There was a great number of people who would beg a heaven-grade alchemist to concoct alchemical pills for them, and there was no shortage of ultimate elites like those in the heaven tier and the deity transformation tier. In front of these true elites, what could the spiritual infant tier count as? Even if there was a restriction in place to stop them, and the deity transformation tier cultivators would be greatly weakened if they made their way here. As long as Ling Han gave a holler, it was guaranteed that all the spiritual infant tier cultivators in the whole North region would obey him. He did not have to be a heaven-grade alchemist. Being a quasi-heaven-grade alchemist was enough. That was because spiritual infant tier cultivators had no need of heaven-grade alchemical pills anyways, as earth-grade alchemical pills would be more than enough. Chapter 456, Heaven-grade Alchemist, Ling Han. Chapter 456, Heaven-grade Alchemist, Ling Han. Tang Zuming could feel his facial muscles twitch madly too. He knew that even if Ling Han failed, there was definitely no one who would dare to touch a quasi-heaven-grade alchemist. Even if his great-grandfather was here, he would think highly of Ling Han as well. An 18-year-old quasi-heaven-grade alchemist. Was he still far off from becoming a true heaven-grade alchemist? Why was there such a freak in this world? How was anyone else supposed to live when he set such a high standard? Only Zhu Xian'er's beautiful eyes shone brightly. She knew that Ling Han possessed extraordinary talent in alchemy, but had never imagined that he would really be able to become a heaven-grade alchemist. This was a colossal pleasant shock for her. Pung! Ling Han simply picked up the alchemy furnace and walked out. With a sweep of his eyes, he discovered an empty public square and hurriedly raced there. Everyone knew that he intended to have the alchemical pills withstand the calamity of thunder there, and thus gathered around it and stood firmly to watch. Ling Han reached his destination. His right hand suddenly opened the lid of the alchemy furnace and 3 jade-green immediately pills shot out of the furnace and fled in different directions, as if they had a life of their own. But it was precisely at this moment that the thunder tribulation took place, without any prior warning at all. Quang! 3 bolts of lightning struck at the same time. They struck the 3 alchemical pills, and pa, pa, pa. All 3 alchemical pills immediately fell down from midair. Ling Han moved swiftly and caught each of them. However, one of them had been directly turned into ash, and only 2 fell into his hands. This was the most ordinary return origin pill, and had thus attracted the most ordinary kind of thunder tribulation. 1 strike and it was over. When Ling Han had concocted pseudo-immortal grade alchemical pills in his last life, he had actually drawn out a 9-colored divine lightning that almost spread to him even. When he recalled it even at this moment, he could still feel his heart speed up quickly and turn ashen pale in terror. He gripped the 2 return origin pills in his hands and raised them high. The alchemical pills had not turned into ash. He had succeeded. Gods, an 18-year-old heaven-grade alchemist. Though no one knew what kind of alchemical pill Ling Han had concocted, knowing that these 2 pills were heaven-grade alchemical pills was enough for them. Respectful greetings, Grandmaster Ling. All the alchemists knelt. Even Gongyang Tai-sun was no exception, a fire flickering in his eyes. Gods, finally, a heaven-grade alchemist had emerged from the North region. Moreover, it was a record-breaking 18-year-old youngster. Who could compare to that kind of achievement at any time in history? Even that Ling Han, who had been acclaimed as the Alchemy Emperor 10,000 years ago, would have to admit defeat in face of such an outstanding feat. How strange. The 2 geniuses of alchemy from 2 different generations were actually both named Ling Han. What an astonishing coincidence. Elder Shi knelt. Zhuo Feng hesitated slightly before he, too, knelt. Only Tang Zuming was shaking in fear. Gods, he had actually commanded someone to hunt down and kill a heaven-grade alchemist. Even if his great-grandfather was here, there was no way he could save him. He was done for. He was finished. He was so terrified that his knees were shaking. He wanted to flee back to the Middle State, hide in the Tang residence, and never leave. But it was as if his feet weighed 10,000 pounds. He could not take a single step at all. Ling Han casually stored away the 2 return origin pills. He would not be able to sell them at all in the North region. He would have to wait until he went to the other 3 regions, or the Middle Stian Sea. He strode towards Tang Zuming, scaring him so much that he shivered even more violently. At this moment, even if Ling Han struck him dead where he was standing, it was guaranteed that no one would dare to say a word in objection. In this whole world and era, the only people who would be able to exert some form of control over Ling Han would be the other 2 heaven-grade alchemists. However, they were both in the middle state, too far to be able to help. Pa! Tang Zuming knelt down and sobbed. Please spare me, Grandmaster Ling. I beg you to spare me, Grandmaster Ling. After tossing and turning restlessly, he could only come up with this phrase. He was truly so terrified that he was completely out of his wits. Ling Han rushed forth and immediately gave him a thrashing. This also meant that he had no intention to commit murder. Otherwise, why would he have gone to so much trouble? If he really wanted to kill Tang Zuming, he needed only wave his sword and it was done. However, this was possibly a descendant of his disciple, so he decided to educate him properly. Everyone else was struck dumb. Who would have imagined that a noble, prestigious heaven-grade alchemist would actually be so violent? He had actually gone ahead and thrashed Tang Zuming in public openly. What was the difference between his actions and those of a common thug, then? The imposing image that Ling Han had just established collapsed instantly. Of course, his deterrent force as a heaven-grade alchemist did not lessen in the slightest. He was still in existence that they could all only gaze up at in admiration and reverence. When he was finally satisfied with his thrashing, Ling Han stopped and declared, "The 9-leaf black Anaderma, hand it over." Tang Zuming was stunned at first. Then he realized that he was still alive. And he was no idiot. He had merely been scared stupid just now. Now that he thought about it, since Ling Han was willing to beat him up, that meant that Ling Han did not intend to kill him. He could not help but feel a great joy for getting a new lease of life. He quickly took out the 9-leaf black Anaderma from his spatial ring and handed it over to Ling Han. He then said, "I'm sorry, Grandmaster Ling. Because this is a necessary ingredient in one of the alchemical pills that my great-grandfather is in the midst of concocting, I had bought it over." "Hung, it's not rare for you to use your great-grandfather's name, is it?" Ling Han asked coldly. Tang Zuming's heart shook. He could hear the displeasure in Ling Han's voice and quickly assured, "I will definitely change my habits. I won't do it again." Ling Han humphed and shot out a finger which pressed down on Tang Zuming's dantian. "Grandmaster Ling, what did you do to me?" Tang Zuming asked hurriedly. He did not feel anything odd happen in his body, but absolutely did not believe that Ling Han would give him a tap for no reason. Ling Han smiled calmly and said, "I just made you unable to be a man." "Ah!" Tang Zuming screeched shrilly. He was incredibly fond of womanly charms, so if he'd lost his ability as a man, then what was left for him to live for? "No!" he cried in incredible grief. "No, no, no. I want to be a man. I want to be a man." "Shut up." Ling Han gave him a slap. "It would not be difficult for you to return to being a man, but that would depend on your future performance." Tang Zuming nodded his head repeatedly like pounding a stalk of scallion repeatedly and said, "I will definitely perform well. I will definitely perform very well." Ling Han nodded and said, "Then we'll see." Tang Zuming could not help but be disappointed. He naturally hoped to immediately regain his ability as a man, but could he actually force Ling Han to release the restriction on him? He wanted to weep but had no tears. If he had known this would happen, he should have fled back to the middle state 2 days ago. He would not have clashed with Ling Han, either. Who would have thought that Ling Han would actually put up such an elaborate pretense? He obviously had the genuine skill of heaven grade, yet humbly remained in the position of an earth grade low-level alchemist, causing him to kick such an extremely huge iron sheet. He was now feeling so horribly wronged. However, at this moment, he dared not to make the smallest complaint. The only thing he could do now was to stand seriously and obediently. Since Ling Han obtained the 9-leaf black Anaderma, he was naturally in a very good mood. He said, "I'm leaving." Then he turned, planning to walk out of the North Pill Pavilion. Grandmaster Ling. Innumerable alchemists gathered around him. Gods, They had never even seen a heaven-grade alchemist, so they naturally had to admire him for a few moments longer. Meanwhile, Elder Shi and Zhuo Feng were both kneeling in front of Ling Han, asking for pardon respectively. Grandmaster Ling, please forgive our previous lack in manners. Neither of them placed any importance on their pride or reputation and directly began to slap themselves severely. There was nothing else they could do. This was a heaven-grade alchemist. In the whole world, there were only 3, and their status was on par with ultimate elites of the Shattering Void tier. Who would dare offend such an existence? Ling Han was irritated and said, "Don't follow me. I still have things to do. As for you two, head to my restaurant and work for a month. If you perform well, I will forget what has happened a few days ago. If you do not, we will definitely perform well." Elder Shi and Zhuo Feng declared simultaneously, their expressions filled with pleasant surprise. Chapter 457, Arrangements for Various Matters. Chapter 457, Arrangements for Various Matters. Dark Angel _ Forget Not created another record. Previously, there were 2 members of the Prodigy role working in the restaurant, and this had already led to a very big commotion because those people on the Prodigy role were definitely going to advance to the Flower Blossom tier. Yet now, not only was there a strong elite of the Flower Blossom tier willingly here to work as a waiter, there was even a mighty elite of the Spiritual Infant tier who did not mind doing such menial tasks like serving food and drinks. That was the Spiritual Infant tier they were talking about here, an existence at the very apex of martial arts in the North region. Now, who would dare create trouble and forget not? Even the Thousand Corpse sect would have some reservations, right? Could they lose everything in one go without any rewards and suffer a double loss after trying to harm their foe? Not just the 2 of them. Tang Zuming had also docilely came here to work, and his identity was very soon known, a black-grade high-level alchemist, and moreover, the direct descendant of one of the 2 heaven-grade alchemists of the Central Prefecture, Tang Zishur. Fuck. When they heard that information, everyone could not help but exclaim in their extreme shock. This was somewhat even more shocking and astonishing than a powerful elite of the Spiritual Infant tier working as a waiter. What kind of noble, prestigious status did the young master of the Tang clan possess? It could be claimed that even in the well-known 3 great sects and single valley of the North region, he could do as he liked. Even powerful Spiritual Infant tier cultivators would have to bow their heads in deference to him, but now, he was obediently working as a waiter. Fuck. Yet Ling Han was completely uninterested in all of this. He had initially planned to rush back to the Rain Country, but the 12 Heaven Mystery Realms were about to open very soon, and he had managed to obtain the key to the Sagittarius Palace Hall. If he missed this chance, then he would have to wait another 100 years. After much consideration, he decided to concoct the Restore Spirit pill first, then have someone send it back to the Rain Country so that Ling Dongxing could heal his spirit base. He would then make a trip home after he came out of the Mystery Realms. Furthermore, now that he had regained the status of a heaven-grade alchemist, he naturally should not waste it. He immediately wrote a letter which he sent back to the Winter Moon sect to request them to release his mother. Of course, he would not say that Yu Hongchang was his mother, to prevent some people like the Ao clan getting dangerous ideas to make use of Yu Hongchang to exert some control over him. He only requested them to release her in a forceful manner, and demanded for her to be brought to Extreme Yang City, where she would be sent to live temporarily in the North Pill Pavilion. He did not offer any reason at all. So what if he didn't? I am a heaven-grade alchemist, and I am really as willful as that. So what can you do about it? It would take about a month's time from the moment that the 12 Heaven Mystery Realms appeared out of thin air until the moment that others could officially enter. By now, more than a dozen days had passed, and after another dozen over days, it would be completely open. However, in these dozen over days, Ling Han was extremely vexed. All the alchemists in the North Pill Pavilion saw him as their idol, and every single one of them was a fanatic who came every single day to pay their respectful greetings. It was all right even if they were not able to see him personally. They would definitely still kneel down outside and pay their respects. They already thought of Ling Han as the object of their faith and a totem for them to revere. With so many people coming to pay their respects, naturally, the news could not be kept secret forever. The residents of extreme Yang City finally found out that the owner of Forget Not and Alchemist King Pavilion was actually a newly advanced heaven-grade alchemist. No wonder there were so many important people racing there to work, and no wonder that the Alchemist King Pavilion would make such a boast. Could a heaven-grade alchemist still not be claimed as a king? For Ji Derong and Shuigu Cheng, they no longer considered the matter of them working at Forget Not a disgrace. On the other hand, this had become a source of pride for them. Just take a look. The two of us were the first cultivators to work at Forget Not, and that was even sooner than any cultivator of the spiritual infant tier or the flower blossom tier. In terms of hierarchy, those two would have to address them as senior apprentice brothers. Ling Han was actually quite free. He had already concocted the Restore Spirit pill and especially requested Lu Jitong to run this errand. With an Earth-grade low-level alchemist by his side to take care of him, there would definitely be no problems in Ling Dongxing's recovery process. Gongyang Tai-sun even personally made a trip to the Winter Moon sect. With an Earth-grade mid-level alchemist present, as well as the written decree of a heaven-grade alchemist, he did not believe that the Winter Moon sect would purposely delay matters and refuse to release his mother. He was spending every day studying the Tiandu Heaven Star Array. By drawing parallels through inference, he felt that it should facilitate his sword skills. Young Master Han, Miss Zhu Xian requests an audience with you. Ling Han had just been deducing the Tao of the array in the courtyard when Zhu Wuju knocked on the door and announced his guest in a low voice. Ling Han hesitated slightly, then said, "Let her come in."
Yes.
Zhu Wuju replied, then left. Actually, if it was any other person, he would definitely not come and inform Ling Han. However, Zhu Xian was the greatest beauty of the North region, and he truly hoped that she could become Ling Han's wife. Only the greatest beauty of the North region would be qualified to stand beside a man like Ling Han, after all. After a moment, a light knock sounded on the courtyard doors again, and two people entered. Zhu Xian, as well as Zhu Longxing. The Zhu Xian now had not even a little bit of arrogance left in her attitude. She could not help but bow her head and maintain a submissive posture, looking very well behaved. "Xian pays my respects to Grandmaster Ling." Zhu Xian lowered her body and paid her respects. Her white skirts spread out as she lowered into a bow, as if she was an exquisite fresh flower that was blooming. Zhu Longxing hurriedly bowed in respect as well and said, "My respectful greetings, young Master Han." Ling Han raised his hand and asked, "What's the matter?" He did not have any time he could waste. "Grandmaster Ling, can you help Xian concoct the Subduing Tiger Heaven Fortune pill?" Zhu Xian directed a very hopeful look at Ling Han. "I can," Ling Han agreed quite quickly, "as long as you can get me the ingredients, and I'll offer you a friend's-only price. A level 9 spirit tool should be enough as my fee, or 10 level 8 spirit tools would be acceptable too. However, in the case of level 7 spirit tools, I would like at least 1,000 of them." Zhu Xian's face had turned completely pale. Even if she was the greatest beauty of the North region, if she really sold herself, would she actually manage to get a level 9 spirit tool in exchange? "Haha, I was just joking. No matter what, we're friends, after all, so just get me the ingredients," Ling Han said with a grin. Zhu Xian breathed out in relief, but her face was still extremely troubled. Though the fee for pill concoction was waived, the Subduing Tiger Heaven Fortune pill needed a total of 3 heaven-grade ingredients, and they were not that much cheaper than a level 9 spirit tool. How could a mere spiritual pedestal tier cultivator like her get her hands on them? "Grandmaster Ling, you are a heaven-grade alchemist, so you should have some means to obtain those 3 main ingredients, right?" she probed. Ling Han humphed and said, "Have you been spoilt rotten by others? Do I have any kind of relationship with you? Why must I help you? You are indeed quite pretty, but that is all there is. Don't think all in this world are fools." With such a harsh rebuke from Ling Han, Zhu Xian could feel herself instantly tear up. She had never thought that being beautiful was something she should be happy about. If it wasn't for the fact that she possessed extraordinary talent in martial arts, she would definitely have long become Somoin's toy to be played around with as they liked. But in front of such a forceful young master like Tang Zuming, she felt very helpless, because the former could easily grip her weakness, and could even use forceful means to obtain her body. Not everyone was as gentlemanly as Yao Huiyu. There was indeed no one who would dare to do anything to her in the North region, but the whole world did not merely consist of the North region. Grandmaster Ling! She looked at Ling Han miserably, her beautiful eyes delicate and sad. Even a heart of stone would melt for her. However, Ling Han's martial intent was even sturdier than iron. His heart did not soften in the slightest. He merely continued to stare coolly at this genius beauty. Zhu Xian'er gritted her teeth and said, "Xian'er knows what to do now." Then, she actually turned around and left. Yet Ling Han was a little confused. What did she know? But who cares? Why haven't you left yet? He swept a glance over Zhu Longxing. Zhu Longxing leaned close and said with a bootlicking expression, "Hee, brother-in-law." Pooh! Ling Han instantly spat out a mouthful of water all over his face. Chapter 458. Arriving at the Mysterious Valley. Chapter 458. Arriving at the Mysterious Valley. Dark Angel _ Cough. Cough. Ling Han erupted into an endless bout of coughing, looked at Zhu Longxing, and asked, "Who are you calling brother-in-law?" My sister is so beautiful, and brother-in-law, you are so brilliant and mighty. So whom would my sister marry if not you? The two of you are definitely a match made in heaven, and there is no other who would be a better match. Zhu Longxing leaned closer, acting chummy. Rubbish. Ling Han shot him a glare. Yet Zhu Longxing was not the slightest bit scared and was still all smiles as he said, "Brother-in-law, you haven't seen my sister's face. If you had, you would definitely fall in love with my sister. She's so beautiful that a single glance would be able to captivate you." Ling Han looked at him strangely. Was this guy Zhu Xian'er's younger brother, or someone trying to pimp her out? Thinking about it in this way, Zhu Xian'er was indeed quite pitiful. Aside from having to run all over the place for her master who had suffered a Dao injury, she also had such a worrisome younger brother who was so determined to marry her off to a powerful, noble person in order to shelter him from the wind and rain. Ling Han was irritated and gave him a slight tap with his finger. "Brother-in-law, what did you do?" Zhu Longxing asked, confused. Ling Han smiled and said, "I made you temporarily lose your ability as a man." What ability as a man? At first, Zhu Longxing was clueless before he finally came to realization. Instantly, he was so terrified that he began to screech shrilly, "Brother-in-law, how could you do this to me? I am extremely loyal to you, and have full intentions to marry my sister off to you." Ling Han clapped his shoulder and said, "As long as you stop calling me brother-in-law, I will consider releasing the seal on you." Brother-in-law, Zhu Longxing was extremely determined in this matter. "You truly don't want to be a man?" Ling Han asked, surprised. "Brother-in-law, I will wait until you change your mind," Zhu Longxing declared with great confidence. He was not an idiot. On the contrary, he was a very smart young man. Who was Ling Han? He was merely 18 years old, yet had already become a heaven-grade alchemist of which there were only 3 in this whole world, and was the greatest person in the entire North region. Furthermore, his cultivation level had reached the spiritual pedestal tier, and in the previous test for battle prowess prior to the Prodigy tournament, he had even delivered a blow with an estimated 20 stars of the spiritual infant tier battle prowess. A man with such genius in both alchemy and martial arts, how many millennia would pass for even one to appear? Was there any stronger backer than this one? The moment Zhu Longxing heard that Ling Han had become a heaven-grade alchemist, he was determined to have Ling Han as his brother-in-law. As long as he could become Ling Han's brother-in-law, who in this whole world would dare to touch a hair on his head? The brother-in-law of a heaven-grade alchemist. Wouldn't that be even more awesome than the sect master of the Winter Moon sect or the pavilion master of the North Pill Pavilion? As a result, he did not mind suffering a little bit now. He was extremely confident in his sister's charm and believed completely that she would definitely be able to move Ling Han. And once Ling Han became his brother-in-law, would he still have to worry about some seal on him not being released? By then, he would naturally return to a state of vigor and health, and who knows how many beautiful women would willingly fall into his arms. Tolerating for this one moment would lead to a lifetime of brilliance. It was the easiest choice for him to make. Zhu Longxing stuck close to Ling Han like he was a piece of sticky candy, and no matter what was done, he refused to be driven off, making Ling Han very vexed. He could kill him, but Zhu Longxing had not done anything bad. He had merely called Ling Han brother-in-law a few times, and that was not an insult. Ling Han sighed and asked, "What will make you stop calling me brother-in-law?" "Brother-in-law, just marry my sister. My sister is definitely the best woman in this whole world. Not only is she gentle and kind, she is also the greatest beauty in the world. Brother-in-law, marrying her is definitely not a loss," Zhu Longxing cajoled. Ling Han looked at Zhu Longxing, smiled, and said, "Whoever calls you a fool must definitely be a fool himself." As someone who had lived 2 lifetimes, he was naturally aware what kind of plans Zhu Longxing had in mind. Zhu Long smiled modestly, making sure his attitude was as humble as possible. No matter what, he would definitely not miss out on this wonderful match. On the second day, unexpectedly, Zhu Xian'er actually went to Forget-Not and took the initiative to do menial tasks like serving dishes and wine. This immediately made Forget-Not an even greater focus point of attention, especially when it was already the source of much commotion in the first place. The greatest beauty of the North region was actually here to work as a waitress as well? Forget-Not that was already crowded to bursting point in the first place instantly experienced an upgrade in the length of the queues waiting outside. It could not be denied. The attraction level of a beautiful woman instantly defeated any spiritual infant tier or flower blossom tier cultivator. At least, there had not been so many customers attracted by the spectacle of Elder Shi and Zhua Gao Feng working as waiters. Ling Han was surprised. So this was the realization that Zhu Xian'er had come to be a waitress. He really could not comprehend the logic of women. There was no word to describe the charm of Zhu Xian'er. Merely 2 or 3 days had passed, and Zhu Wujiao, Qian Yi, and Guang Yuan had all become her solid supporters. Even Lu Yutong and Li Sichan had been won over, and they completely did not treat her like an outsider. There was no need to mention Zhu Longxing, of course. He was completely a self-proclaimed brother-in-law. His skin was thick enough that no arrow would be able to pierce through. By now, only Hunyou was in the same camp with Ling Han. This little girl had never had any fondness for Zhu Xian'er, and she was even more displeased at the sight of her now. She would always bare her little white teeth at the latter, as if she wanted to pounce and take a bite out of her. The day that the 12 heaven mystery realms would open was getting nearer and nearer. Thus, Ling Han brought all the members of his group and set off. Zhu Xian'er was naturally traveling alongside them as well. She seemed to have inherited her younger brother's thick skin too, and did not feel that there was anything strange in this arrangement. The site where the 12 heaven mystery realms would open was located 10,000 miles east of Extreme Yang City, and taking Ling Han's speed into account, it was a trip of about 4 days. The group hired 2 carriages in total. The men would be in one, and the women would be in the other. Initially, Ling Han would definitely have sat with Lu Yutong and the others, but because there was Zhu Xian'er present this time, he chose to sit with Qian Yi and the other men because he would be able to use the Black Tower without Zhu Xian'er's knowledge. On their way there, it was inevitable that they would encounter robbers and thieves, but either one of Zhu Wujiao, Guang Yuan, or Qian Yi stepped out each time and the matter was resolved. They would easily thrash any band of thieves to utter, absolute defeat. After 4 days, they arrived at the Marshalgu Valley. By now, a great number of cultivators had arrived as well. They had set up tents outside the valley and were currently waiting for the mystery realms to open. This valley was very mysterious. It was hidden all year round by an endless fog. Anyone who stepped in would definitely lose all sense of direction and thus be trapped within until their death. Only in the month prior to the day that the mystery realms opened would the fog that surrounded this place disappear. The entrance to the mystery realms was in the deepest parts of the valley. Thus, it was very simple to check whether the mystery realms had opened. One only needed send out some people to stand guard outside the valley's entrance and observe whether the fog had dispersed yet. Fairy Zhu. When they saw Zhu Xian'er disembark from the carriage, at least over 100 young men rushed over. Every one of them had eyes that shone brightly, looking very fanatical. The title of the greatest beauty of the North region was not something that had come from empty praises. Zhu Xian'er was obviously used to this kind of situation. She smoothly responded, both elegant and cool, ensuring that everyone would not feel that they were able to approach her, yet she would not cause anyone to feel bad. Her graceful bearing as a goddess was on full display. Ha ha ha, I have long heard that there is magnificent beauty in the North region. Indeed, it is a fully justified reputation. A young man strode out of the masses. He was only in his early 20s, with a tall height and long legs, as well as handsome and clean-cut features. He looked too dashing to be described by mere words. And what was more shocking was the fact that there was actually a pair of wings of light behind him that would spread out occasionally. With a light flap, the aura that emanated was extraordinarily overbearing. He strode over, and those on either side could not help but feel their spirits shake, and unable to stop themselves, knelt down. Chapter 459, East Region's Prodigy. Chapter 459, East Region's Prodigy. Reverie _ This person was like a god spirit that descended to earth, his presence shocking. He was clearly only a spiritual pedestal tier warrior, but as his martial intent spread, its deterrence power was almost equal to that of the flower blossom tier. Behind him, several beautiful female martial artists held their cheeks, their gazes full of stars as they couldn't help but scream, appearing infatuated. He took large strides, arriving before Zhu Xian'er. The corner of his mouth quirked up, revealing a smile that would drive people crazy as he said, "Zhu Xian'er, take off the veil. Let me see if you're qualified to be my bride." So handsome, so assertive. When Jian, marry me, I am willing to be your bride. Quite a few female martial artists screamed, extremely fanatical. Zhu Xian'er's pretty face turned cold. As her gaze swept by Ling Han, she said indifferently, "Xian'er already regards Ling Han as master. As long as young Master Han agrees, Xian'er will naturally take off the veil." In other words, it meant that if Ling Han disagreed, then you can take a hike. What? As those words were said, everyone was stirred up. The girls were naturally indignant that Zhu Xian'er actually rejected such a super handsome man, and the men's eyes were red with envy. Regards Ling Han as master. What did that mean? Did you offer both your body and mind? In that moment, countless gazes that wished to kill all targeted Ling Han. If gazes were like swords, Ling Han would definitely have been slashed into shreds, and if gazes were like fire, Ling Han would definitely have been burned into ashes. Haha, you're that young Master Ling? The godlike youngster's gaze focused on Ling Han as he revealed a smile of disdain. I'm called Wen Jian, and the future world's #1 sword. Haha, Middle State has some idiot self-proclaimed world's second sword. Luckily, he didn't call himself the first sword, or else I'll definitely let him know what's called the way of the sword. So handsome. Hearing those bold words, many girls were smitten once again. Ling Han smiled indifferently and said, "Yao Hui, you certainly has the right to be called the world's second sword in the future, but as for you, I only see lowliness, and whether or not you can become the world's lowliest, that'll depend on how hard you try." When Jian's expression immediately turned grim, he said, "You dare insult me? Insult you? I don't think so. I've only told truth as it is." Ling Han shrugged his shoulders. When Jian laughed boisterously, facing the sky, and said, "In this world, no one can insult me." "Oh, you really think you're something?" He originally had no interest in paying attention to such a person with exploding confidence, but when Jian asked for trouble, "Apologize to me. If I'm satisfied, I'll just cripple one of your arms," when Jian said loftily. Ling Han uttered an "oh" and said, "Judging by your tone, you don't seem to be from the North region?" "No kidding. How could North region possibly have such a genius like me? I am East region's #1 genius in the way of the sword." When Jian said without a shred of modesty, as his gaze swept by, seeing many men reveal infuriated expressions, he couldn't help but sneer. "What, not convinced? Then bring it on. I can beat you till you guys are convinced, starting from you." As he said the last words, he stared at Ling Han again. You don't even have the right to fight with Master Ling. A white-clothed figure came in a flash. It was Shun Zhongcheng. I'll defeat you. White-robed Sword King. The 8th place on the Prodigy roll. White-robed Sword King. Mess up that asshole from the East region. Many men began shouting, as one Jian's arrogance already incited the public's anger. Of course, another person also became the public enemy, which obviously referred to Ling Han. However, quite a few people had already heard that Ling Han became a heaven-grade alchemist, and at least on the surface, who dared to pick a fight with one. When Jian was somewhat astounded, looking at Ling Han as he said, "You're also some master? Don't you get frightened when I tell you?" Ling Han smiled slightly. "Haha, what master could frighten me?" When Jian said with disdain, "You're at most a high-level Earth-grade alchemist. Although in terms of your age segment, this is already very impressive." Ha 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 ha. The entire place was instantly filled with laughter. When Jian was baffled by the laughs and said balefully, "Were my words that funny?" "Idiot. Young Master Ling is a heaven-grade alchemist." Zhu Wuzhi yelled out. Ha 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 ha. This time, when Jian burst into laughter, almost laughing to the point of tears. Wasn't this funny? Who didn't know that there were only 2 heaven-grade alchemists in all of the vast lands? But these 2 have diligently studied alchemy for countless years, so how could it possibly be the immature youngster before him became one as well? However, after he laughed for a while, he found that no one joined him, and all glanced at him as if looking at a fool, except for a few of the beauties that still had fanaticism in their gaze. Master Ling certainly is a heaven-grade alchemist, which the entire world reveres. An old man opened up. He was utmost Imperial Sect's Flower Blossom Tier elite, who specially escorted the sect's disciples in entering the Mystery Realm. Great Sorrow Sect's Flower Blossom Tier elite also said, "That's right. Master Ling is North Region's most distinguished genius, like no other." Respects to Master Ling. The Flower Blossom Tier warriors at the scene paid obeisance to Ling Han one after another. Alchemy and martial arts were not the same domain but were linked in countless ways. If not for Ling Han's low cultivation, these Flower Blossom Tier warriors would have to kneel to pay their respects. Ling Han simply raised his hand, appearing composed. He'd seen these occasions many times in his previous life, so he naturally wouldn't be flustered. When Jian was finally greatly shocked. One Flower Blossom Tier warrior could be muddle-headed, but it was definitely impossible that several hundreds of Flower Blossom Tier martial artists all had strokes. Hiss, the youngster before him was truly a heaven-grade alchemist? Holy SHT, that was way too young. Alchemists had status beyond the norm, and even if you had no request for one, you definitely couldn't offend them. Because offending an alchemist, especially a high-tier alchemist, meant many people would volunteer to stick up for the alchemist without the latter even asking. If word got out that when Jian was so frivolous towards a heaven-grade alchemist, then would there still be a place for him in the entire world? When Jian was proud but not stupid, so he immediately lowered his arrogant head and said, "This lowly one didn't recognize Master Ling." "I beg your pardon, Master Ling." Ling Han smiled slightly and said, "I'm actually not some heaven-grade alchemist, just a small martial artist. Weren't you going to teach me a lesson? Come, come, come. Let's fight to our heart's content." Like hell, you think I'm stupid? No way when Jian would believe that several hundred Flower Blossom Tier warriors would cooperate in acting with Ling Han, who was a mere spiritual pedestal tier. Was that possible? He laughed dryly and said, "Master Ling sure knows how to joke." He was also an extremely slick person, not stumped at all by Ling Han's words. When Jian, come fight. Shin Zhongcheng, however, was full of fighting spirit. He was also a sword user, and seeing a sword expert, he couldn't help but want to spar a bit. When Jian just kicked an iron plate and was very embarrassed, so he naturally would want to regain face. Snorting at once, he said, "Since you want to be defeated so badly, I'll fulfill your wish." Chapter 460, The Powerful One Jian. Chapter 460, The Powerful One Jian. Reverie _ Shun Zhongcheng spoke no more superfluous words, directly thrusting his sword. Hong. He drove the sword towards Jian as if the thing driven wasn't a sword, but a mountain of swords, giving people a feeling of extreme heaviness. If pierced by this word, one would definitely be smashed into pieces. This was White-Robed Sword King's martial intent and belonged to his own way of the sword. Ling Han nodded inwardly. This younger generation already walked down a path that belonged to themselves. It was no wonder that it was said people on the Prodigy role could definitely become Flower Blossom tier warriors. Each one was certainly out of the ordinary. When Jian's expression, however, was full of disdain, and he unconcernedly pointed with a finger as a powerful sword intent circulated and a flash of sword light flashed. Hong! Behind him 2 wings of light fluttered gently, making him seem like a god descending to earth. Pong! With the point of a finger, Shun Zhongcheng was immediately sent flying and the long sword almost slipped out of his hand. Yet he caught it forcibly as blood splattered from his perlicue, and even the skin ruptured, looking extremely tragic. Everyone was greatly shocked. That was Shin Zhongcheng, the White-Robed Sword King, the 29th place on the Prodigy roll last year and this year's top 10, enough to represent those with the strongest battle prowess in North Region's younger generation. However, he was defeated in a single blow, and by only a finger. Hiss, the difference was way too great. Everyone knew that with the 4 regions, Middle State's martial arts level was the highest, and the North region was the lowest of the 4 regions, without even deity transformation tier elites. However, did the younger generation also had such a great difference? Clearly, when Jian was also in the spiritual pedestal tier, and even if he was at the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, the gap shouldn't be so wide. You're no good. When Jian shook his head and said, if you cultivate diligently till the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, becoming the same as me, then you would be barely qualified for me to use my sword. However, I'm truly a bit disappointed that this is your so-called genius on the Prodigy roll and ranked number 8? CK, mocking crowd again. Hee brother one, then let me battle you. Yang Junhao walked out, battle intent burning in his gaze. When Jian glanced at him once and said, you have some strength, and are about the same age and cultivation as me, which means you're satisfactorily gifted. However, with the same martial arts tier, that only represents that our power is close, but power is only a part of battle prowess. You mean, although our tiers are the same, your battle prowess is far above mine? Yang Haojun said indifferently, but in his tone was an obvious fury. That's only natural. When Jian said as if it was a matter of fact. I sure want to see for myself. Yang Junhao laughed instead of being angered. He shook his hand and unleashed his long sword. This was a spirit tool, entirely crimson red, and covered with vein-like lines. I'll let you have 3 moves and defeat you in 1, when Jian said loftily, sweeping his gaze across the surrounding people. Yang Junhao sneered, and no longer said superfluous words, simply pouring power into the long sword and beginning to activate his spirit tool. Wong, wong, wong on the blade. The vein-like lines lit up one after another as ceaseless raging flames surged out, instantly raising the surrounding temperature by a whole lot. However, the raging flames surged in front of him, forming a casing, protecting him within, as if a shield. A spirit tool that was both offensive and defensive. Fiery sea and raging tides, sword of violent winds that breaks through void. Yang Junhao shouted loudly, leaping out and bring a sea of flames with mighty momentum. When Jian shifted his feet, evading swiftly. Shua, 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 Yang Junhao attacked repeatedly, while when Jian kept dodging. It was as if Yang Junhao had taken the upper hand. As expected of the first on the Prodigy roll, this strength is too powerful. Defeat this arrogant disciple of the East region, and let him know that we North region aren't to be provoked. Everyone complimented one after another, while the girls that were crazy about when Jian were extremely nervous, gripping their hands tightly in front of their chests and praying for when Jian. 3 moves have passed, when Jian said indifferently, and shook his right hand as a sword appeared, very simply thrusting at Yang Junhao. This sword thrust broke through Yang Junhao's concentrated attacks, splitting the sea of fire, and pierced the fire shield. Pa! This shield trembled once and shattered as the blade continued to thrust almost without a pause, and with a pu, Yang Junhao's right shoulder was penetrated. When Jian withdrew his sword and said indifferently, "Merely so, truly disappoints me." When Jian. The girls who were extremely nervous earlier began to scream, appearing indescribably excited. The men's morale was low, and even more so full of disbelief. One strong as Yang Junhao was defeated in one move. Then even if Hunyou or Ling Han took the field, what could even be changed? At the last fight when Hunyou fought Yang Junhao, it was also a close fight. Although Hunyou didn't use her terrifying teeth, it still proved Yang Junhao's exceptional strength. When Jian was too strong to the point of making people hopeless. Zhu Xin, after exploring the mystery realm, how about returning to East Region with me? When Jian asked Zhu Xin. Hiss, this guy actually dared to dig Master Ling's people? Everyone was shocked. Seeing when Jian yielded at first, they thought he feared Ling Han, but now he openly invited Zhu Xin. He completely didn't care about Ling Han at all. Obviously, this guy certainly didn't want to come into a direct conflict with a heaven-grade alchemist, but he wasn't the least bit afraid of one. He certainly couldn't resist a heaven-grade alchemist head-on, but didn't need to be deliberately patient and accommodate him. Clearly, he didn't need Ling Han to refine pills. Austerity followed desirelessness. This guy was truly hard to see through, and was quite cunning. He admitted earlier that he didn't dare to exchange blows with Ling Han, and now if Ling Han flipped out at him, wouldn't that tarnish Ling Han's image as a heaven-grade alchemist? If word got out, everyone would say that a dignified heaven-grade alchemist had no tolerance for others and bullied a spiritual pedestal tier relying on his position. Ling Han's gaze turned cold. He disliked being toyed with in the palm of others. Niu will beat the heck out of him. Hunyou jumped out and blocked Ling Han, walking towards Wen Jian with her hands behind her back, and said, "Ugly monster, Niu will fight you. If you lose, take this woman away." She turned around and pointed at Zhu Xin. Everyone was dumbfounded. Why did losing mean taking away Zhu Xin? If so, then they also wanted to lose, wishing they had taken the field earlier. Wen Jian laughed loudly and took out a stick of sugar-coated haw, handing it to Hunyou, and said, "Little girl, take it and eat it on the side." Hunyou began to drool and snorted. "You think food can tempt Niu? Then why are you drooling?" Wen Jian laughed and said, "This little girl is quite interesting. Whose kid is it?" Everyone looked at him sympathetically. This little girl's bite was the battle prowess of 20 stars flower blossom tier. Why don't you try? Xiao. Hunyou leapt out, firing a punch at Wen Jian. What? Ling Han was slightly shocked. Hunyou broke through and was at the spiritual pedestal tier. Chapter 461, Punishment. Chapter 461, Punishment. Reverie _ With Ling Han's former life's heaven tier perception, there were very few people he couldn't see through. Hunyou was one of them. Unknowingly, this little girl was already in the spiritual pedestal tier. So fast, when Jian only saw a blur before his eyes and Hunyou's small fist was already in front of him, giving him no chance to parry or dodge. However, he was a genius after all, and with a glare, 2 beams of light fired from his eyes, streaking towards Hunyou's small hand. Pung. U.P. Dated. By Novelful. Calm with a sound, the 2 sword beams hit Hunyou's fist. The power behind them wasn't small, deflecting Hunyou's fist and scraping past her cheek. When Jian's combat awareness was extremely strong, he immediately started counterattacking once the danger was resolved. With a finger as sword, he thrust it at Hunyou. Xiao. Hunyou's figure flashed, disappearing once again. When Jian cried out, "Not good," in his thoughts. As expected, a wind blew against the back of his head as Hunyou's fired another punch. He hurriedly leaned forward, but all the black hair on his head was raised, as if turning into swords that stung at Hunyou. Pong! As the punch hit, several hundred strands of Wen Jian's hair instantly snapped, but traces of blood emerged on Hunyou's small hand from being stabbed by the hair swords. Hunna's infuriated, firing her small fists repeatedly. When Jian controlled the hair swords to resist as he turned and was finally face-to-face with Hunyao, pointing with a finger, instantly 9 flashes of sword chi winnowed and martial intent spread, emitting a terrifying coercive presence. At this moment, he was like an emperor of the path of the sword, no one daring to look directly at him. Hunyao, however, was unafraid, turning her fist into claws and waving at those attacks of sword chi. Pu, 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 pu. The sword chi was all destroyed, but Hunyao's attacks were also to no avail. The few exchanges between the two were extremely fast, just like flashes of electricity, each move and style extremely critical. If either of them made a slight mistake, they would receive a heavy injury. A hush fell over the crowd. Even everyone's breathing was involuntarily held back. Only after a good while could the sounds of long rough and long breathing be heard. Everyone was shocked and sighed. So it turned out these two people were strong to such a degree. No matter who else took the field, faced with Hunyao's attacks, they'd definitely be hit, and in Hunyao's position, faced with Jian's counterattacks, they'd definitely suffer ruthless aftershock. However, the two tied, truly frightening. Jian's was staring wide-eyed. This little girl was so young, and she could already rival him. If they were the same age, then wouldn't Hunyao only need one hand to suppress him? Hunyao's viciousness erupted as she kept attacking continuously. Her petite figure leapt like lightning, making Jian weary with parrying. However, he was certainly strong even under such circumstances. He still had power to return attacks, creating quite a bit of pressure for Hunyao. Ling Han was shocked as it was his first time seeing Hunyao fight so strenuously. It was not that Hunyao didn't think of using her terrifying teeth to decide the victory with one attack, but that she had no chance unleash an attack so closely. Jian's battle prowess was also not to be underestimated. If Hunyao were to bite on Jian, she would definitely be struck by Jian's sword chi. The result of that would truly be hard to tell. Humph! Hunyao stopped. She had the absolute initiative, and the sugar-coated haw that was originally in Jian's hand was snatched by her. At this moment, she peeled the sugar coating and began eating it deliciously. Ugly monster, you can take this ugly woman away. Jian laughed instead and said, I really underestimated the people of the North region. Little girl, you can rival me, and after 20 years, I'll wait for you to come challenge me. With that said, he turned to leave. Hunyao cried out in anger, how could there be a person that was so untrustworthy? She clearly said that if he couldn't beat her, then he should take the ugly girl away. And yet he left just like that, too detestable. Hunyao's more impressive. She actually tied Jian in a fight. Hee, truly interesting. The first of the Prodigy role, Yang Junhao, was actually defeated in one move, but the third-ranked Hunyao could suppress Jian. Wonder if Yang Junhao's gone red yet. Everyone discussed spiritedly. Hunyao didn't disappoint them as expected. The stronger the opponent, the stronger she was, at last saving the face of North Region's martial arts. Although there were many people who could suppress Jian at the scene, but if a Flower Blossom tier warrior intervened, wouldn't that truly be saying that there was no one else in the North region? If this Flower Blossom tier martial artist was of the young generation, then it wouldn't be a problem, proving the strength of North region's martial arts. But if only one from the older generation could suppress him, then it would truly be humiliating. Ling Han looked at Zhu Xian and said, Follow me. The two entered the already set-up tent, which blocked the crowd's gaze, making the crowd feel it on the inside. A man and a woman alone. Would they do something embarrassing? The tent was large, not only having chairs and tables, but also beds. No one lacked a spatial ring and could bring all they wanted. Ling Han sat down and said, When did I become your master? Zhu Xian slowly fell to her knees and said, Xian wants to do some things for Master Han. Ling Han laughed and said, Being a maidservant at a tavern and following by my side, that's doing things for me? Please instruct me, Master Han. Xian will definitely try hard, Zhu Xian said seriously. Ling Han rolled his eyes. Since when did this girl become endearingly silly? He shook his head and said, This doesn't feel good. He pointed at the table and said, Go lie over there. Zhu Xian'er's pretty face turned red and then white. Did this guy's lust erupt, wanting to take her over here? She hurriedly said, Master Ling, don't misunderstand. Xian'er truly wants to work for you. I didn't misunderstand. You misunderstood. Ling Han took out a rattan. I dislike those who don't listen the most, so I'm going to beat you. Zhu Xian'er walked over obediently to the side of the table, prostrating and sticking up her butt. She couldn't help but blush in this position, so embarrassing. Ling Han laughed mischievously. After this whipping, this girl wouldn't bother him anymore, right? Pa, he unhesitatingly lashed out, emitting a crisp sound. But this was only a normal rattan, so how could it possibly hurt Zhu Xian'er, who was a spiritual pedestal tier? Pa, pa, sounds were ceaseless. Zhu Xian'er's pretty face was getting more red and hot. She seemed to have understood something and couldn't help but blush. She could imagine how she looked right now. Her pert buttocks should be facing Ling Han, right? Too embarrassing, too shameful. Her consciousness was somewhat blurry, and she felt that her face was shockingly hot, as if it were about to burn. A feeling never felt before breeding within, sprawling and rising. Just when she was in a daze, she heard Hunyo say, Ling Han, you're hitting too lightly. Let Nyo help you. Before she came back to her senses, her but felt an unbearable pain, making her cry out involuntarily. She turned around abruptly and saw that Hunyo was biting down on her butt. Chapter 462. Entering the Mystery Realm. Chapter 462. Entering the Mystery Realm. Reverie _ What's going on? What's going on? Outside, the crowd was extremely impatient, jumping up and down and almost going crazy. They heard pa, pa, pa sounds earlier and now this rapturous scream. What exactly was going on inside? It was impossible not to think wrongly. If it weren't for the fear of a heaven-grade alchemist's power and influence, someone would definitely have charged into the tent to see what was happening. After a while, the tent was opened, and Zhu Xian'er walked out. But without taking 2 steps, she reached towards her petite, but as if it was hurt. And watching her gait, it was clearly somewhat limp. It was over. Their goddess had been defiled. Beast. Ling Han felt it strange. The 12 Skies mystery realm was a mystery realm that belonged to the North region. So why did a genius from the East region come? As the time approached day by the day, more and more people came to the mountain valley. For example, the Winter Moon sect, the Beast Emperor sect, and the like came in groups 1 by 1, 10 people at a time. A great sect like the Winter Moon sect possessed several dozen entry quotas, and sects that were slightly lesser like the Great Sorrow sect and the Cold Water sect had a few to a dozen quotas. However, only these sects were qualified to receive entries, or either Leviathans like the Alchemist Society and Spirit Treasures Pavilion. However, the Alchemist Society didn't care at all, and the Spirit Treasures Pavilion gifted it to those on the Prodigy roll. When the Winter Moon sect arrived, Ling Han saw Feng Yin. After 1 year, Feng Yin also advanced to the spiritual pedestal tier, even reaching the 2nd layer. His advancement speed was somewhat shocking. It seemed his bloodline had already completely developed. Wild strength berserk apes were shattering void tier beings in the ancient times, and when the bloodline was awakened, it had great benefits on improving martial arts. Additionally, he also had a spiritual infant tier teacher who could bring him endless resources. Before the Flower Blossom tier, it was acceptable no matter how fast one's progression was, but if it was still so after the Flower Blossom tier, then it would truly be frightening. Feng Yin also saw Ling Han and revealed a complicated look, but it immediately turned resolute, with blistering killing intent. He obviously knew Ling Han had become a heaven-grade alchemist, and normally speaking, he would never have a chance for revenge in this lifetime. However, Ling Han rose too abruptly and hadn't gathered the power that heaven-grade alchemists should have, so he still had a chance. Secretly killing Ling Han, especially in a mystery realm, who would know? This guy actually didn't attend the Prodigy battle. Ling Han nodded inwardly and guessed that Feng Yin was at a key stage in cultivation, probably breaking through to the spiritual pedestal tier, the reason why he didn't make it in time. Everyone came to pay respects to Ling Han, who was a dignified heaven-grade alchemist, and could be said to be the figure with the highest status in the North region at the moment. Even if the masters of the three greatest sects of the valley came, they would have to be respectful in front of Ling Han. However, this was North region, and the strongest were warriors of the spiritual infant tier. Even stronger elites couldn't come over without difficulty. Thus, for spiritual infant tier warriors, whether Ling Han was a heaven-grade alchemist or an earth-grade one really had no difference. This was called, when the cat was away, the mice would play in North region was so. Spiritual infant tier warriors were the strongest in martial arts, just like shattering void tiers in the middle state, so they naturally didn't need to fear a heaven-grade alchemist. Of course, if several heaven-tier martial artists, or deity transformation tier elites, followed by Ling Han's side, the situation would obviously be different. Although the mist in the valley had already dispersed, no one dared to enter. It was rumored that before the mystery realm officially opened, the valley when the mist dispersed was greatly inauspicious. Those who entered would most likely be killed, so everyone would rather stay outside a while longer. After an entire month's time, everyone entered the valley one after another. The major forces in the North region jointly controlled this mystery realm, and no one could enter without an entry quota issued by them. On the way, Ling Han took Guang Yuan and Li Xichan on another path. When the time came, he would store the two inside the Black Tower and enter the mystery realm using the secret key. However, he didn't want to be target for all. The inheritance of the 12 palaces was too overwhelming. Even Flower Blossom and spiritual infant tier cultivators would extend their hands while disregarding his heaven-grade tier alchemist identity. Moreover, contending over opportunities inside a historic site, no one had to give anyone face, and at the worst they could just kill him. And if they could do away with witnesses, so what if they did? This time there were certainly Flower Blossom tier warriors that entered, like Ao Feng of the Winter Moon sect. Flower Blossom tier elites that weren't 50 years of age could definitely be considered young, conforming with the entry conditions of the 12 heaven mystery realms. Moreover, the Beast Emperor sect, the Blood Flame Valley, and so on also had such geniuses who were highly ranked on the Prodigy roll 20 years ago. Therefore, Flower Blossom tier warriors, or else it was quite normal to break through in the 80s. With Flower Blossom tier competitors around, Ling Han decided to be more low-key. Lu Yutong, Ken Yi, and the others took one path and dragged Zhu Xian'er along, heading to the bottom of the valley where the Mystery Realm's entrance was, whereas Ling Han came to a thick forest inside the valley with Guang Yuan and Li Xichan, and seeing there was no one in the surroundings, he stored the two inside the Black Tower and took out the key of the Sagittarius Palace. Wang. The key immediately lit up as if it established a connection to a type of power in the mountain valley. Wang. A flash of brilliance wrapped around him, as his figure immediately disappeared. When he reappeared again, he was in an unfamiliar place. It was a barren land with round rocks everywhere, a field of gray. Is this a small world? Ling Han looked afar. In the ancient times, there were mighty cultivators who could separate a city, and even a greater place from the world, overlapping with the current world and forming a mystery land, a very miraculous feat. Such heaven-defying handiwork, Ling Han definitely couldn't do it in his previous lifetime. Just as he was about to let Guang Yuan and Li Xichan out, he was startled, because not far from him, someone was teleported inside. People were randomly teleported after entering the mystery realm, appearing in different places. That was a very fine beauty, her skin white and sparkling as if it was a high-grade jade. She was tall with long legs and her bosom ample, extremely captivating. She was obviously somewhat at a loss, but very soon composed herself, and at the same time, she discovered Ling Han, revealing a vigilant expression. Fighting over treasures in mystery realms, everyone was a hidden enemy. So what if it was a heaven-grade alchemist? And here, the most important thing was to protect oneself. The spiritual chi here was really abundant. Updated by Box Novel. Ling Han retracted his gaze. After he advanced into the spiritual pedestal tier, each spiritual pedestal layer constructed consumed endless origin power. So even for him, his cultivation progression speed now dropped to 3 months for increasing one layer. This actually wasn't slow. After 2 years, he would be past the spiritual pedestal tier. His base was so solid, and being invincible in the same tier, there naturally was a price to pay. However, cultivating in here, he only needed 2 months to increase by 1 layer. Unfortunately, 12 Heaven Mystery Realms only opened for a few months at a time. He was now at the middle stage of first layer, the spiritual pedestal tier. Without some special occurrences, he would only be second layer spiritual pedestal tier when he leaves. HM? Ling Han suddenly felt a shred of crisis and immediately held a sword in hand, standing still. The girl in the distance thought Ling Han harbored killing intent towards her, immediately turning to run. Pong! A strange scene appeared. A rock stood up, smashing its fist forward, and the girl instantly was mushed into blood and pulp. Chapter 463, Rock Spirit. Chapter 463, Rock Spirit. Reverie _ This was a golem. It shrunk its body earlier, as if an inanimate stone, but now it suddenly rioted, smashing a delicate flower-like beauty into pulp. The scene was a somewhat tragic. The golem wasn't huge, only a meter or so tall. Its head and limbs wormed out of its jagged body, which were also made of accumulated by pieces of rocks. Rock Spirit, Ling Han said lightly. Heaven and earth had spiritual power that could birth all kinds of living creatures, and several of which weren't completely made of flesh and blood. For example, Ents, a race that was formed after plants possessed wisdom. For example, Strange Fire, another type of living creature that, at its pinnacle, could turn into the shape of a human, such that even normal martial artists wouldn't be able to tell it was different from a true human. The one he faced now was a rock spirit. The living spirits of the 5 elements had some things in common. They felt no pain like normal living creatures and were very, very hard to kill. Strange Fire didn't have a physical body and couldn't be hurt by gravity. Only water-type arts could restrain it. The special trait of a rock spirit was its scary defensive power, like Ling Han's rock cliff body. Although it was incomparable to rare metals of the same tier, it was still extremely tough. After mushing the girl, the rock spirit turned to face Ling Han. Despite having no facial features, it still gave Ling Han a feeling of being stared at. This place may be a holy land for cultivation, but it's also a dangerous place, Ling Han muttered. However, if I can subdue a few rock spirits, then I could spread beans into soldiers, surely enough to give people a great surprise. The 1,000 Corpse sect thirsted for the spatial spirit tool in his hand that could accommodate living things for the purpose of hiding a large army inside when they launched a surprise attack. The effect of it would definitely be shocking. In the time he was lost in thought, the golem charged over and fired a punch, momentous and heavy, breaking through the speed of sound. A visible void instantly formed behind the fist, with chaotic burst of the sonic boom. Ling Han laughed, also greeting with a punch, and said, "Think I'm scared of you? Let's see whose fist is harder." Pong! The 2 fists clashed as a shock wave instantly burst forth. The golem was sent flying, its right arm shattered. Ling Han was astounded. He didn't hold back in this punch, simply not using arts or fist chi, but it only shattered one of the golem's arm, yet not made the golem explode completely. It could be seen how powerful the golem was and how tough its physique was. Against the golem, there was no need to hold back. Because the golem's shattered arm turned into infinitely small rocks that fell on the ground, but immediately began rolling as if it had its own life. When the rocks gathered underneath the golem's feet, the rocks fluttered and connected to the severed arm. In an instant, the golem's arm returned to how it was. Strange Fire didn't have a physical body and wasn't hurt by brute force. On the other hand, the golem had a tough physique on top of its terrifying recovery power. Ong! The golem's head opened, as if cracking open a large mouth, unleashing a furious roar. It had never suffered such a great loss, having its arm shattered by someone else. Tong, 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 tong. It charged at Ling Han in large strides, and with each step, the ground trembled slightly, showing its terrifying mass. It fired another punch. "Can't beat you into submission?" Ling Han smiled and also fired a punch. Pong! The golem's right arm was shattered again, and this time, Ling Han didn't wait for it to recover, charging up and firing a flurry of punches. The golem's body was very hard, not much different from rare metals of the same tier, but it still couldn't be mentioned in the same breath after all. Otherwise, it'd be Iron Man and not Golem. The rock spirit was somewhat lacking in defense when compared with the gold spirit, but its recovery power was strong. After receiving a dozen punches, the golem was completely shattered into bits and pieces, spreading all over the ground. However, these small pieces of rock immediately began rolling and recombining. Ling Han didn't stop it, but when it was about to finish reconstructing, he fired a punch and shattered it into bits and pieces again. The golem began to reconstruct, but every time it was about to finish, Ling Han would break it up. After 5 consecutive times, it finally stopped reconstructing, and the several hundred pieces of shattered rocks began to wriggle one after another, turning into several hundred small golems. Ong! These golems synchronized and roared in anger. Instantly, the pieces of rocks that lay on the desolate field all stood up. They were all golems. T. Ling Han was somewhat surprised that he actually landed in the den of golems. Was this luck extremely terrible or extremely good? Ong! All the golems roared towards the sky, echoing one another. Haha! Ling Han laughed loudly. With this many golems, he could organize a powerful army. He waved his hand and said, "Quickly come into the bowl." Pong, pong, pong. There were at least 100 large golems charging towards Ling Han, and the shattered golem took advantage to reconstruct. The life force and recovery power of these type of spirits were truly a bit overbearing. Ling Han greeted them by firing punches wildly at these golems. His battle prowess was too terrifying, sending a golem flying with each punch, but these golems were unharmed, immediately charging right back. Hard to take care of. Just the right time to polish his fist techniques. Ling Han launched the War Elephant Fist, and 7 flashes of momentous chi surged, evolving into 8 ancient war elephants that rammed into those golems. He pulled no punches as his battle prowess immediately rocketed, and the war elephants dominated, crushing into pieces any golem that was touched. However, this only suppressed the golems and couldn't destroy the golem's strong recovery power. They still reconstructed, entering the fray again. Ling Han considered storing them into the Black Tower, but every golem had its own consciousness. It would be the same after shattering their consciousness, be unable to store them in the Black Tower no matter what. It seemed like they needed a taste of power before they learned a lesson. Ling Han unleashed the Demon Birth Sword. With the destructive power of a 10th tier spirit tool, would these golems still be able to recover after a strike of the sword? Once Demon Birth Sword was unleashed, the 10th tier spirit tool's vicious presence overflowed the area instantly. The golems lost some of their viciousness, beginning to hesitate. They were extremely vicious and merciless a moment ago, having no scruples at all, but now, haha, you guys also know fear? Ling Han said, laughing. However, these golems were naturally vicious after all. They immediately regained their vicious attitude, rushing towards Ling Han. Ling Han swung Demon Birth Sword, and instantly 9 flashes of sword chi surged, sweeping towards those golems. The golems weren't highly intelligent, but they had instincts. Each one of them avoided the Demon Birth Sword's blade. However, they couldn't completely avoid the sword chi. Pu. Many golems were instantly struck by the sword chi and sliced into 2. This time, the golems reconstructed much slower. The sword chi was slashed out by a 10th tier spirit tool, possessing terrifying destructive power even with the golem's recovery speed. They couldn't reconstruct immediately. Ling Han suppressed all the golems once again with his own might, showing his invincibility in the spiritual pedestal tier. Ong! These golems retreated one after another and gathered together, piling up into a human pyramid. Seeing these golems continuously drilling into each other's bodies, Ling Han couldn't help but be astounded, blurting out, "Could it be that these golems were all broken up from a huge golem?" You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.